Chapter 30. People from the Assassin Temple had killed a young talent from the Knights Templars participating in a monster hunter's trial. This was something that could not be hidden. Furthermore, the nature of the matter was extremely vile. If they were not careful, it would affect the foundation of the 6 major Temple League. However, to everyone's surprise, the Knights Templars expressed their silence on the matter. They did not file a lawsuit with the Temple League. The Assassin Temple was even more low-key. Both parties acted as if nothing had happened. Even when the Alliance Committee members from the other major Temple Alliance asked about it, the Knights Templars and the Assassin Temple gave a unified statement, saying that it was a misunderstanding. Since the 2 major Temple Alliance had maintained a tacit understanding, the other temple naturally did not say anything. After all, they were not the ones who suffered losses. As for how they resolved the matter, they could not find out. This year's Monster Hunters trial had ended at this point. Most of the matches had ended. Only the final ranking was left. Long Haochen lost, and Yang Wenjiao was heavily injured. Both of them had lost the possibility of continuing to participate in the preliminary round. As Long Haochen's performance in the match against Yang Wenjiao was particularly outstanding, he was ranked 6th in the preliminary round for the Knights Templars. Yang Wenjiao, who had entered the top 5 but could not continue to participate, could only be ranked 5th. After stretching his body, Long Haochen gradually woke up from his sleep. The pain from last night still lingered, but compared to last night, it was much better. Rubbing his eyes, Long Haochen turned over and sat up. It had been a long time since he had slept so deeply. Kair. After regaining consciousness, the first thing that came to his mind was that beautiful face. Even though his mental state was extremely poor last night, that short look had already deeply imprinted that face into his mind. Was I dreaming last night? Long Haochen was not even sure if what happened last night had really happened. After all, he was too weak at the time. The bumpy feeling under his fingers caught his attention. When he touched it carefully, there seemed to be writing. He quickly sat up and looked at the words. Sure enough, a line of beautiful words was engraved on the bed. Rest well, and don't worry about me. When the finals begin, you and I will meet again. Kair. It wasn't a dream. It wasn't a dream. Long Haochen was overjoyed when he saw the message. He clearly remembered that Kair said she didn't blame him last night. We'll see each other in the finals? What did that mean? Last night, Kair seemed to have used her spiritual power to heal me. Is she also a professional of the 6th Great Temple? But she couldn't see it. Which temple does it belong to? Questions kept popping up in his mind, but how could he find the answers? After a while, Yihua and Lin Xin came to see him. The siblings had already lost the competition, so they could rest for the next 5 days and wait for the finals. Yihua checked Long Haochen's body again, especially his meridians and internal organs. After discovering that there weren't any sequelae from using the sacrifice skill, he let out a sigh of relief. You idiot. After checking, Yihua scolded angrily. His face was very gloomy. Lin Xin was so scared that she stuck out her tongue, but she didn't dare to persuade him. Long Haochen lowered his head and said, Teacher, I just wanted to test my ability through actual combat and stimulate my potential. Using the sacrifice skill was something I suddenly realized. Don't be angry. I won't be so impulsive in the future. Yihua said angrily, Bullsh *T. Do you think I am angry because you challenged Yang Wenjiao? You are wrong. I am angry because of your stupidity. Let me ask you, between you and Yang Wenjiao, who is stronger? Long Haochen was stunned for a moment and looked at his teacher in confusion. Naturally, he is much stronger. Yihua snorted. You still know that he is stronger? Then why did you still choose to fight recklessly? Have the battle techniques that you and I learned for the past 2 years been eaten by a dog? Fighting recklessly is very satisfying, isn't it? But have you ever thought, what if this is a battlefield against demons? What if your opponent is demons? What if you have companions by your side waiting for you to rescue them? Do you also fight like this? The series of questions made Long Haochen speechless. Yihua said coldly, How many battle techniques have I taught you? That's right. Fighting recklessly is indeed easier to stimulate one's potential, especially when fighting recklessly with an opponent that is stronger than oneself. However, If you really want to increase your battle experience and stimulate your potential, you can't treat it as a competition. It couldn't be treated as a competition, but as a battle of life and death. What should you do in a life and death battle? Didn't I teach you before? Long Houchin lowered his head again. Try to use your skills to deal with the enemy and protect yourself as much as possible. Yihua clenched his fist. To think that you still remember. Now tell me, are you a guardian knight or a punishment knight? Long Houchin was silent. He didn't know how to answer this question of Yihua's. Yihua said indifferently, in terms of talent, even 10 teachers can't compare to you. However, in terms of experience, even 10 of you can't compare to me. Let me help you answer this question. When you need to punish, punish. When you need to protect, protect. However, you have to pay attention to one thing. When you use the punishment knight ability, don't forget your other identity. Your talent is enough to support you to dual cultivate punishment and protection. Since that's the case, you have to display the advantage of fusing them together in a battle. Don't let me see you act foolishly again. Otherwise, you won't be worthy of being my disciple. Yes. Long Houchin hurriedly replied respectfully. Although Yihua's words were scolding him, it was more of a deep concern for him. He knew that his teacher was afraid that he would take the wrong path. After washing up and eating something, Long Houchin started his training again. Although his body's condition was much better in the early morning, it was only his external spiritual energy and his injured body that recovered. His internal spiritual energy was still completely gone. Only the saint's spiritual stove seemed to have recovered its original splendor. There wasn't much left of the medicine that Lin Xian gave him. This time, Long Houchin didn't take it. Instead, he quietly sat cross-legged. After entering a meditative state, he carefully sensed the spiritual energy fluctuations within the saint's spiritual stove. Gentle, vigorous, boundless. When his consciousness entered the saint's spiritual stove, he immediately felt these 3 kinds of auras. The spiritual energy inside the saint's spiritual furnace that he felt before didn't seem to exist, but he saw a bit of golden light. That golden light was very small, but it was still very eye-catching within the milky white body of the saint's spiritual stove. The golden light was only the size of a grain of rice. However, what made Long Houchin indescribably surprised was that this golden light was actually in a liquid state. Liquid spiritual energy? Could it be that after using the sacrifice skill, I accidentally cultivated a liquid spiritual energy? Subconsciously, Long Houchin began to train according to his usual training method. Because his body currently didn't have any internal spiritual energy, the absorption speed of the external light elements was much slower than usual. However, one mustn't forget that he had the constitution of the Son of Light. His affinity with the light elements was incomparable to anyone else's. Traces of gentle light elements slowly entered Long Houchin's body. He immediately discovered that he didn't need to urge them. These light elements seemed to have found their source and quietly flowed towards the saint's spiritual stove, directly merging with it. The saint's spiritual stove's reaction was very calm. Under its original milky white color, it slightly emitted a faint golden light. Looking inside the spiritual stove, it was just as Long Houchin expected. The light elements absorbed through training directly poured into that drop of golden liquid spiritual energy, becoming a part of it. Because the concentration of the light elements absorbed from the external world was extremely thin, it was far from being comparable to the drop of liquid spiritual energy. Therefore, after the light elements from the external world merged with it, that drop of liquid spiritual energy the size of a grain of rice simply didn't have any reaction. However, this didn't affect Long Houchin's excitement. Without a doubt, he had truly cultivated a liquid spiritual energy. The problem now was how to strengthen it and how to make it come out of the saint's spiritual stove. Thinking up to here, Long Houchin took out a spirit-gathering pill for training and consumed it. The name spirit-gathering pill was something he came up with himself. As the spirit-gathering pill entered his stomach, Long Houchin's blood and chi were immediately mobilized. His body's sensitivity to the light elements in the air suddenly increased. This spirit-gathering pill was a rank 4 medicinal pill that could only be taken by a rank 4 expert. Although Long Houchen had lost his internal spiritual energy, his body was still that of a rank 4 great knight. His meridians were tough enough to withstand the effects of the pill, so there was nothing wrong with it. Sure enough, after taking the spirit-gathering pill, the speed at which he absorbed the light elements suddenly increased. The light elements in the air rushed in from all directions, entering his body through his pores and breathing. Then, like rivers flowing into the sea, they were immediately swallowed by the saint's spiritual stove. At this moment, the saint's spiritual stove was like a bottomless abyss. No matter how much light elements Long Houchen absorbed, it would all be swallowed up. The only change was that the saint's spiritual stove itself was emitting a golden light that gradually became stronger. The drop of liquid spiritual energy within the saint's spiritual stove also began to show signs of gradually increasing in size. Just like this, Long Houchen was completely immersed in his own cultivation state. Cultivation was dry and dull, but feeling the little bit of accumulation brought an extremely strong sense of satisfaction. This was also a common point among all professions. In the blink of an eye, 3 days had already passed. In these 3 days, aside from eating, Long Houchen was completely immersed in his own cultivation state. He also told Yihua about the current situation of his cultivation. However, Yihua was not clear on what was going on with him. Silently waiting was Yihua's only method, and this was without a doubt a good thing. Although he didn't know what mysteries existed within the saint's spiritual stove, Yihua was willing to see Long Houchen's current state, even if he was unable to control everything. That's right. Who could control the growth of the scion of light? However, Yihua had a lot of experience in the aspect of cultivation. To be able to rely on his inferior talent to cultivate to become an Earth Knight, who knew how many different cultivation methods he had researched. Therefore, after careful consideration, he told Long Houchen a possibility, and that was that the saint's spiritual stove was helping him nurture his spiritual energy, nurturing the liquid, internal, spiritual energy. Long Houchen's cultivation clearly hadn't reached the 5th rank. Under these circumstances, it was originally impossible for liquid spiritual energy to appear. Although the appearance of that drop of liquid spiritual energy was very coincidental, Yihua was completely sure that if it was another person, even if they used the sacrifice skill, they still wouldn't be able to have such a fortuitous encounter. The only explanation was the saint's spiritual stove's effect. The saint's spiritual stove produced a special space inside, helping Long Houchen complete the compression of his internal spiritual energy, thus forming the liquid spiritual energy. At that time, when Long Houchen relied on the sacrifice skill to fight against Yang Wenjiao, he exhausted all of his spiritual energy and, to a certain extent, burned his blood and qi. The spiritual stove was one of the most mystical things in the world, and it itself had a certain protective effect. It was very likely that the saint's spiritual stove protected the last seed of spiritual energy in Long Houchen's body, and then gradually produced a compression effect inside. Long Houchen himself already had some understanding of the liquid spiritual energy, and the biggest characteristic of the threshold of the 5th rank was the word compression. Through the practice of this stored power, skill, he gradually found the method to compress it. It was just that he was still unable to directly compress it. He could only rely on the skill to find the feeling. But now it was different. The existence of the saint's spiritual stove directly helped him solve this compression problem and gave birth to the true liquid spiritual energy. As long as he could think of a way to take out the liquid spiritual energy from the saint's spiritual stove and then cultivate his internal spiritual energy to more than 2,000, then the huge bottleneck of the 5th rank wouldn't be a problem for him. With this kind of judgment, Yihua was naturally overjoyed. He repeatedly urged Long Houchen to steadily practice in his room, even if it meant delaying the finals of this year's Monster Hunter Selection Tournament. He was still very young. In the future, there would be many opportunities for him to participate in the tournament. In comparison, being able to take advantage of this opportunity to break through to the Earth Knight rank was obviously more important. The Saint's spiritual stove wasn't big, and its entire volume was about the size of a small wine cup. One could imagine how much liquid spiritual energy could be stored in such a small stove. After 3 days of bitter practice, Long Houchen had exhausted the remaining mana-gathering pills. But the Saint's spiritual stove was also close to overflowing, and the inside was filled to the brim with dense liquid spiritual energy. These 3 days of practice were actually very painful. Because there was no internal spiritual energy within his body, Long Houchen's absorption speed of the external light elements was moderate, maintaining a very slow state. If it wasn't for the assistance of the mana-gathering pills, perhaps even if he spent 10 days or even half a month, he still wouldn't be able to fill the Saint's spiritual stove to the brim. If that happened, he was afraid that he really wouldn't be able to participate in the finals. What Long Houchen didn't know was that when Long Xingwu gave him the Saint's spiritual stove, he already knew that the Saint's spiritual stove had other uses in addition to its auxiliary role in battle. It was just that he didn't directly tell his son about it. Long Xingwu was a Knight of the Seal and had experienced the entire process of cultivation from the first step to the 9th step. Therefore, he was even more aware of the importance of one's own comprehension in the process of cultivation. With his cultivation, he could even let Long Houchen break through to the 5th step earlier and become a fairly good expert without the slightest effort. However, if he really did that, even if Long Houchen had the Son of Light physique, he would probably never be able to touch the threshold of the 9th step in his lifetime. Therefore, he chose to let Long Houchen explore on his own, and in the process of exploring, constantly strengthen himself and comprehend all kinds of difficult problems in the process of cultivation. Regarding Long Houchen, Long Xingwu had absolute confidence. If the possessor of the Son of Light physique didn't have enough comprehension, then who else could have it? The special ability of the Saint's spiritual stove was called Nurture. Therefore, it wasn't only a stove to assist in battle, but also a stove to assist in cultivation. This secret was classified as top secret within the Knights Templars. This was because the Saint's spiritual stove's assistance in battle was only useful to the knight and the warrior. Other professions naturally didn't have much interest in this stove. Moreover, the self-recovery ability of the warrior was far inferior to that of the guardian knight. Later on, this Saint's spiritual stove became the exclusive stove of the Knights Templars. The Saint's spiritual stove was extremely rare. When the other big temples discovered a new Saint's spiritual stove, they would all choose to exchange it with the Knights Templars. Only the internal department of the Knights Templars, after countless attempts, could come up with a conclusion. That was, as long as the first stove a human possessed was a Saint's spiritual stove and the person's cultivation couldn't exceed the 4th step, then the Saint's spiritual stove's Nurture special effect would be activated. This Nurture special effect could only be discovered by the person who possessed the Saint's spiritual stove. Normally, its performance wasn't very obvious, and it only had a very weak auxiliary effect towards the cultivation of spiritual force. However, once it reached a critical juncture, the Saint's spiritual stove's Nurture special effect would play a huge role. For example, the spiritual force liquefaction that Long Houchen was facing, as well as the spiritual aperture that he had to condense when he became a Radiance Knight. With the help of the Saint's spiritual stove, it could be said that a breakthrough was certain. Everyone studied by themselves, and the temple was no exception. If the other temple discovered that the Saint's spiritual stove had such an auxiliary effect on cultivation, it was likely that no one would sell it to the Knights Templars. Therefore, this secret had always been kept secret. At least until now, it hadn't been discovered by the other temple. In fact, even if Long Houchen didn't use the sacrifice skill, he would quickly discover the Saint's spiritual stove's effect. This was because as long as he completed the evolution of the Saint's spiritual stove, its Nurture effect would directly help him break through to the 5th step. Previously, Long Houchen believed that breaking through to the 5th step was the turning point for the Saint's spiritual stove's evolution. Was it finally full? Teacher had said that when the spiritual force was full, it would overflow. Since the spiritual force was already full, then it should be overflowing. No matter how calm Long Houchin usually was, when faced with whether or not he could break through to the fifth step, how could his heart not be nervous? As the cultivation continued, the liquid spiritual force within the saint's spiritual stove became more and more concentrated. Little by little, it rose up and was about to overflow. Finally, the saint's spiritual stove could no longer contain any more liquid spiritual force. A tiny drop of golden liquid slowly flowed down the edge of the saint's spiritual stove. Boom! In an instant, Long Houchin felt his body tremble violently. A dense aura of light had already spread out from his body. A golden halo rose from the top of his head, faintly condensing into a faint golden cloud. This was the ascending spirit cloud that represented advancement. Only when breaking through a large rank would the ascending spirit cloud appear. The total amount of liquid spiritual force in one drop was very small, but it illuminated the meridians within Long Houchin's body. The familiar golden light quickly spread through his meridians, quickly spreading to every corner of his body. Compared to the pale golden inner spiritual force from before, the current color had clearly deepened by several degrees. It was already close to a bright golden luster. Although it was only a drop of liquid spiritual force that flowed into Long Houchin's body, the speed at which he absorbed the light element increased dramatically in that instant. His perception of the outside world also abruptly increased. The powerful feeling from the inside to the outside finally appeared once again. At the same time, the saint's spiritual cauldron also emitted thousands of rays of light. One could clearly see that Long Houchin's chest lit up with a dense white halo. The halo spread and enveloped his body. The saint's spiritual stove in his chest slowly rotated, and drops of liquid spiritual force were thrown out from within. The saint's spiritual stove, which had originally been dyed golden by the liquid spiritual force, once again returned to its original milky white color. It slightly struggled, and traces of strange patterns began to appear on the saint's spiritual stove surface. They were existences that looked like cloud patterns that were spiraling in the air. The original milky white color became a bit more sparkling and translucent. Its volume didn't increase, but the essence of heaven and earth contained within it made Long Houchin feel it more clearly. Evolved, the saint's spiritual stove evolved. Long Houchin immediately realized what had happened. Not only did the saint's spiritual stove evolve, he could also clearly see through his inner vision that a gentle golden liquid was quietly spiraling around the saint's spiritual stove. Shockingly, it was liquid spiritual force. Previously, when he used storing power to cultivate, liquid spiritual force also appeared. But at that time, as long as he dispersed this storing power, the spiritual force would immediately return to normal. But now it was different. Inside his body, around the saint's spiritual furnace, a liquid spiritual power had truly appeared. Although the total amount of this liquid spiritual force was at most equivalent to 100 points, but with these 100 points of liquid spiritual force, would it be far from returning to the peak? 2,000. My spiritual force has definitely broken through 2,000. At the fifth step, I am an Earth Knight. A silly smile appeared on Long Houchin's face. How could he not be excited? A 14-year-old at the fifth step. How inconceivable was this? What he needed to do now was to restore all of his spiritual force. Up to 2,000 points of liquid spiritual force would allow him to completely enter another level. Yang Wenjiao, the next time we meet, perhaps I will truly have the strength to challenge you. In the next few days, Long Houchin was completely immersed in cultivation. Like a metamorphosing silkworm, he completed the process of qualitative change in just a few short days. Alliance Executive Office. Just like the Sacred City, the Alliance Executive Office was also a hexagonal building. The periphery was the office of each of the 6 great temples, while the core area was the place where they discussed important matters. The Monster Hunter selection competition was of utmost importance to the Temple League. The preliminary round had already smoothly concluded 3 days ago. 60 of the most outstanding young people had been selected, which meant that there would be another 12 Monster Hunters in the Temple League, injecting fresh blood into the large group of monster hunters. Today was the day of drawing lots for the finals. All 60 participants would be divided into 6 groups by drawing lots, and they would compete in the 6 branch venues of the Sanctuary Alliance's great trial field for round-robin matches. In other words, in the group matches, every participant would have to experience as many as 9 matches. This way, not only would accidents be reduced as much as possible, it would also allow these young people to continuously increase their actual combat experience through battles. The top 2 of each group and the 4 best third-place participants would enter the knockout round of the top 16. The finals were even longer than the preliminary round. However, one must not forget that there was almost no reward for the preliminary round, but the reward for the top 3 in the finals was 3 spiritual stoves. For any profession, spiritual stoves represented great power. In the preliminary round, as it was a competition within each temple, there might be some mercy. However, in the finals, all the participants would definitely go all out. In order to fight for the 3 spiritual stoves, they would not hold back at all. There were more than 10 staff waiting in front of the Alliance Executive Office, checking the identity of every participant and bringing them into the Executive Office. In the finals, the participants' teachers were no longer allowed to watch the competition. The Monster Hunter's confidentiality level was extremely high in the Alliance. It had to be kept strictly confidential, even for the newbies. There was only an hour to report. If they missed it, they would not be able to participate in the finals anymore. The Alliance had strict control over time. If a powerhouse did not have the concept of time, it would be easy for them to make a huge mistake in the future. Haha, it's time for the finals. I'm looking forward to it. Hearty laughter was heard, and 2 people walked toward the executive office at the same time. A man and a woman. The woman was wearing pink armor. She was tall, and her petite body was completely wrapped in a streamlined chainmail, making her look valiant. Her red hair was draped behind her head, and she was not wearing a helmet, revealing a charming face. Her eyes were full of charm, which could only appear when one's spiritual power had been trained to a certain level. The young man beside her was even more eye-catching. Compared to the woman, the young man was slightly shorter. He was wearing a light golden chainmail, and his black hair was draped behind his head. His clear, light, golden eyes seemed to have a faint halo of light circulating around them. His handsome and exquisite face was even more attractive than the girl next to him. His eyes were gentle and calm, and he always had a faint smile on his face. No matter how one looked at him, he looked like a harmless little boy. The 2 arrived at the entrance of the executive office, and a staff immediately came to greet them. In order not to waste the combat power of the 6 temples, these external service staff were all hired ordinary people, not professionals. Are the 2 of you here for the finals? Please show me the competition number you used in the preliminary round for verification. The young staff was extremely respectful. This was because he knew that those who could participate in the finals of the Monster Hunters preliminary round were the best among the younger generation of the Temple League, and they were all important figures in the future. The man and the woman handed over their number, and soon the staff completed the registration. Knights Templars, Long Houchin, Lin, Xin. Please follow me. The man and the woman were Lin, Xin, and Long Houchin. The 2 came together. At this moment, a surprised voice suddenly came from behind them. Wait for me. Along with the voice, a person quickly but clumsily ran towards them. Long Houchin and Lin, Xin turned their heads and immediately saw a handsome face. His dark green long hair swayed left and right as he ran. If he were to add some but shaking movements, people would definitely mistake his gender. The white magic robe on him set off his outstanding appearance even more. Unfortunately, he was facing Long Houchin, who was even better. Lin, Xin. Long Houchin looked at him in surprise. Lin, Xin laughed and said, "Looks like I made the right bet. My luck is pretty good. I didn't expect you to make it to the finals." Wow, Sister Lin, Xin, you're even prettier now. You look so heroic in your armor. How about you pick me if you get into the top 3? I'll have enough pills. Lin, Xin giggled and said, "Do you think I have a chance of getting into the top 3? Hurry up and register, then we'll go in together." As for Lin Xin, Long Haochen clearly had a better impression of him than the first time they met. If it wasn't for him, Long Haoyue wouldn't have been able to obtain that seemingly important stone orb. Moreover, the pills Lin Xin gave him were genuine. Without that bottle of essence gathering pills, Long Haochen wouldn't have been able to break through to the 5th rank in such a short time. Lin Xin heard Lin Xin's words and quickly agreed. He took out his number and handed it to the staff. The staff was obviously shocked when he saw his number. His expression was even more respectful than that of Long Haochen and Lin Xin. Magic Temple, Lin Xin. The 3 of you, please come with me. The 3 of them followed the staff inside. Long Haochen smiled and said, Brother Lin is very strong indeed. Your preliminaries must have been very smooth, right? Lin Xin said proudly, It was all right. I just got lucky and got 1st place in the preliminaries. 1st place in the preliminaries? Long Haochen and Lin Xin looked at each other in dismay. Both of them were taken aback. They had also experienced the preliminaries and naturally knew how intense the competition was. Although the number of participants in the Magic Temple wasn't as many as the Knights Templars, the cruelty of the competition wasn't any less. Lin Xin actually got 1st place in the Magic Temple's preliminaries. How strong did he have to be? At least he was at the 5th rank. It seemed that his teacher's guess wasn't right. Long Haochen looked at him in confusion and said, Brother Lin is so strong. I'm afraid you have a higher chance of getting into the top 3 in the finals than me. Lin Xin shook his head and said, I can't say. The finals are different from the preliminaries. Actually, luck is very important. After listening to Long Haochen's words, he couldn't help but think, if the finals can be like the preliminaries, where I end up in the top 3, wouldn't I be able to choose the strongest person to follow me? It wouldn't be a problem for him to form his own team. As they spoke, they had already entered the Alliance Executive Office. In front of a wide arched door, the staff stopped and made a gesture of invitation. The arched door was open. There were 2 warriors inside, 1 on each side. The 3 of them walked through the arched door and entered a wide hall. The entire hall was circular in shape. There was a platform about 5 feet tall in the center and several chairs around it. It could accommodate about 500 people at the same time. A huge crystal lamp hung down from the top, illuminating the entire hall. Lin Xin said in a low voice, This is the small conference hall of the Alliance Executive Office. Today's draw should be here. Lin Xin looked at him in confusion and said, Are you familiar with this place? Lin Xin chuckled and said, I've been here a few times in the past. Long Haochen and Lin Xin looked at each other and felt that Lin Xin was more and more mysterious. At this moment, there were already many people in the conference hall. Long Haochen looked around subconsciously and soon saw Yang Wenjiao. Yang Wenjiao also saw him. Compared to the preliminaries, Yang Wenjiao's face was a little pale. When he saw Long Haochen, his expression changed, but there was obvious hostility in his eyes. What's wrong with him? He doesn't look too good. Long Haochen thought to himself. However, his fighting spirit also rose. If he had the chance to meet Yang Wenjiao, he would definitely challenge him again. With the experience from the previous battle, Long Haochen realized that he had many shortcomings. Teacher was right. Why should I fight him head-on? Am I worse than him in terms of techniques? Soon, he saw another familiar face. Not far in front of them, a large bald head shone brightly under the light of the crystal chandelier. Wasn't that Sima Xian? He had also entered the finals. Thinking back to his weird fighting style, Long Haochen couldn't help but smile. A violent priest who didn't know how to heal. Knock, knock, knock. The familiar sound made Long Haowu stand up reflexively and look behind him. He wasn't the only one. There were at least 10 pairs of eyes in the conference hall looking behind him. Most of them belonged to the Assassin Temple. Their faces were covered with black veils, but the respect in their eyes couldn't be hidden. Yang Wenjiao, who also turned around because of the sound, was stunned. It's her! It's her! It's her! Yang Wenjiao didn't know why the Knights Templars chose to keep the peace. He didn't ask his grandfather for help either. Losing was his humiliation, and he had to rely on his own abilities to get back at them. However, seeing Ka again here, The shock in his heart was unparalleled. The fact that she was here meant that she had also participated in this year's Monster Hunters trials. This proved that she was not even 25 years old. Thinking back to the battle that day, Yang Wenjiao couldn't help but break out in a cold sweat. The wounds on his body that had completely healed seemed to be aching. Kai Er's tyrannical attacks left an indelible impression in his heart. At that moment, he saw Long Haochen walking towards the blind girl who was using her green bamboo cane to touch the ground. Kai Er, you really came. Long Haochen quickly stepped forward. After not seeing her for a few days, he felt something in his heart being released when he heard the familiar sound of her bamboo cane. Almost without hesitation, he reached for her hand. With her green bamboo cane on the ground, Kai Er's body moved back half a foot, avoiding Long Haochen's hand. She whispered shyly in his ear, "There are so many people here." Long Haochen scratched his head awkwardly. "Sorry, let's sit over there." As he spoke, he didn't pull Kai Er's hand this time. Instead, he grabbed her green bamboo cane and led her to where he was sitting. Seeing this, Yang Wenjiao's heart was filled with grief and indignation. It was really because of this brat. What an undeserved disaster. But the assassins from the Assassin Temple didn't think so. Each of them had a strange look in their eyes. That seemed to be a knight. What was his relationship with Big Sister Number 1? Although Kai was only ranked 10th in the Assassin Temple trials, in the hearts of these assassins, they almost worshipped her. Chapter 31. Long Haochen used the green bamboo cane to pull Kai Er back to where she was sitting. He asked Lin Xian to give up a seat and arrange Kai Er to sit next to him. Lin Xian was not too surprised. After all, he had only known Long Haochen for a short time. However, Lin Xian was surprised. "Brother, who is this?" Long Haochen blushed and said, "This is Kai Er. Sister, she's my friend." Lin Xian looked at him and then at Kai Er. A strange smile appeared on her face. "Hee hee, she's your little girlfriend." "Hello, Miss Kai Er. My name is Lin Xian. I'm Long Haochen's sworn sister." "Hello," Kai Er said softly. However, she only said 2 words and stopped talking. Long Haochen whispered in her ear, "Kai, are you here for the competition too?" "Yes." Kai nodded slightly. Long Haochen could not help but say, "Why haven't I heard you mention this before?" Kai said, "You haven't asked me why I'm here in the sacred city." Long Haochen scratched his head. He did not seem to have asked. Lin Xian said, "Miss Kai, seeing that you're wearing a black veil, you should be from the Assassin Temple, right?" Kai nodded lightly. To the side, Lin Xian's face was filled with astonishment. A blind assassin? However, he had been in the society for a long time. He would not offend others. Although he was surprised, he did not ask. On the second floor of the meeting hall, a few people in black with veils on their faces were looking down. From their white hair, one could tell that they were not young. "That's that kid? How does he know the saint?" An old man in black could not help but ask. "I'm not sure. According to our investigation, the saint doesn't seem to know this person." "Don't know? You don't know him, yet you hurt the grandson of the Knights Templars for him? Is this how your Eagle Squad investigates?" "Eldering, don't be angry. You also know the saint's temper and her senses. He doesn't like being followed by us." Humph. The black-clad old man standing in the middle was none other than the Assassin Temple's Vice-Temple Master, the Chivalry Hall's Hall Master, Ing Sui Feng. No matter how he looked at it, he found Long Haochen to be an eyesore. He actually dared to abduct the reincarnation saintess. To think that Han Q, that old geezer, came to me to denounce me. I should be the one to denounce them. The Knights Templars even abducted Kai Er. The more Ing Sui Feng thought about it, the angrier he became. He could not help but exude a sharp, killing intent. Long Haochen, who was conversing with Kai Er in a low voice, felt his entire body go cold. In that instant, it felt as if his blood was about to freeze. A thick layer of golden light immediately burst forth from his body. The golden light did not spread outwards. Instead, it condensed, forming a huge golden sword above Long Haochen's head. "Eh!" Ing Sui Feng exclaimed in surprise. "5th grade? Isn't it 4th grade? Old Eagle, how did you find out? It's 4th grade, right?" The old man standing beside him was filled with doubt. Unless he just broke through in the past few days. Ing Sui Feng, what are you trying to do, you old geezer? An angry voice rang out. In the next moment, Han Q had already appeared in front of Ing Sui Feng. With a wave of his right hand, a layer of golden light enveloped the two of them, isolating them from the outside world. Ing Sui Feng was also in a bad mood. What am I doing? What do you think I'm doing? You little brats of the Knights Templars want to kidnap Kai Er. He almost said the two words holy maiden. Han Q snorted angrily. What do you mean kidnap? She was willing, okay. Free love, do you understand? Ing Sui Feng did not show any weakness as he roared. Free love my ass. Our Kai Er is only 14 years old. That Long Houchin is clearly an old cow eating young grass. Han Q is furious. Bullshit. You're the old cow eating young grass. Our Long Houchin is only 14 years old this year. He's only a few months older than him at most. Only 14 years old. A faint smile appeared in Ing Sui Feng's eyes. A 14-year-old rank 5 knight. This is really shocking. Han Q really wanted to slap himself. He had rushed over because of Ing Sui Feng's sudden killing intent towards Long Houchin. The fact that Yang Wenjiao had been injured by the Assassin Temple had already caused the upper echelons of the Knights Templars to be extremely dissatisfied. If something were to happen to the rising star Long Houchin, the good relationship between the two temples that had existed for many years would really be shaken. He did not expect that under Ing Sui Feng's provocation, he would accidentally spill the beans. I was wrong. It's 24 years old. Han Q immediately calmed down. He restrained his anger and said indifferently. Ing Sui Feng walked forward, laughed, and patted his shoulder. Yes, it's 24 years old. I understand. From your mouth to my ears, what is our relationship? I will definitely keep it a secret for you, just like how you will keep it a secret for us. Doesn't this strengthen the close relationship between our two temples? At this time, Han Q was really suffering in silence. He looked at Ing Sui Feng with a gloomy face and snorted heavily. You two old things, what kind of shameful things are you doing here? At this time, an old voice sounded. It was an old man wearing a golden magic robe. He looked at the two people in the golden light with a puzzled face. Han Q raised his hand and dispersed the isolation light. It's nothing. Ing Sui Feng is having a seizure. I'm here to take care of him. Ing Sui Feng had just gotten a big advantage, so he was in a good mood. That's right. I was having a seizure just now. I'm fine now. Old Lin, the group drawing is about to begin. I heard that your kid has also entered the finals. The old magician's face changed. Don't mention that little bastard to me. I get angry when I mention him. Ing Sui Feng laughed and said, that's enough. In fact, you're very proud of yourself. Your grandson's attainments in potioneering are even appreciated by a certain powerful person in your temple. The old magician glared at him and said, that little bastard's attainments in potioneering are really good. But I don't know what he did wrong. He just had to join Monster Hunters. Han Q said, he's still much better than my kid. He's so arrogant, but he didn't even pass the preliminary round. Oh, didn't Hanyu break through to the 5th rank? How come he didn't even pass the preliminary round? The old magician looked curious, but he didn't hide the teasing expression on his face. Lin Shin, you old thing, just gloat. Humph. Han Qian's face was filled with displeasure. Lin Shin laughed and said, how was this gloating? I thought only my little bastard was disgraced. It turns out that your kid is also disgraced. This makes me feel better. At least my kid made it to the finals. You. Han Q glared at Lin Shun. What? You want to fight? Come on. I've recently researched how to use a 9th rank forbidden spell. Although it's not complete yet, I can try it on you. However, I could try it on you. Lin Shun was not afraid at all. Enough. Don't fight like cocks the moment you meet. Aren't you afraid of being laughed at? A gentle female voice sounded. A middle-aged woman wearing a white robe slowly walked over. Her long golden hair was draped behind her. Her white robe was embroidered with golden high elves. Although she wasn't young anymore, her beautiful face was still charming. Seeing her, Han Q and Lin Shun were obviously stunned. They both harumphed, but didn't say anything. Ing Sui Feng smiled and nodded at the woman in the white robe. Nice to meet you, Ruo Shui. If someone heard the way she addressed her, they would definitely be shocked. This woman in the white robe, who looked to be in her 40s, was actually a cardinal of the Temple of the Priests. That was a rank 8 powerhouse. And looking at how Han, Q, and Lin Chen acted, it was obvious that they gave her face. Ruo Shui smiled and nodded. Nice to meet you, Temple Mastering. Sighing, she continued, I heard you guys talking about the preliminary round. Our Temple of the Priests also has a little monster. Oh. The other 3 people's gazes fell on him at the same time. The 6th temple had a certain competitive relationship with each other. It was one of the competition methods in the finals of the Monster Hunters trials. Hence, they wouldn't report the situation of the preliminary round to each other. At this moment, looking at Ruo Shui, who looked like she was having a headache, they were naturally curious. Ruo Shui sighed and said, For the next preliminary round, I'm afraid we'll have to change some rules. As she said that, her gaze naturally fell on a certain bald man below. In the meeting hall, the golden light that appeared on Long Haochen's body attracted the attention of many participants. However, the murderous intent came quickly and disappeared just as quickly. Long Haochen quickly returned to normal, but his back was still drenched in cold sweat. Kaiyer's eyes moved. Just when Long Haochen felt the intense murderous intent, she had already raised her left hand. Only when the murderous intent disappeared did she quietly put her hand down. What happened? Li Xian asked curiously. Long Haochen shook his head and said, I don't know either. Just now, I felt like someone had locked onto me. There was a very strong murderous intent. Lin Xian said nonchalantly, It's nothing. Someone just wanted to test you. Did you see that? On the 2nd floor, the 6 temples will all send their higher-ups to watch the lot drawing ceremony. It must be one of them who has nothing better to do. This is our Alliance Executive Office. Who dares to cause trouble here? At this moment, an old man in light gold martial arts attire walked up to the platform in the middle of the meeting hall. The old man was burly and seemed to be even more muscular than the bald man. His short white hair stood up like steel needles. His age didn't make his body slack at all. The muscles under the martial arts attire were rippling like granite. On the light gold martial arts attire, there were 8 silver dragons embroidered on it. His gaze was even more majestic. As soon as he appeared, the pressure from the roof naturally caused the entire place to quiet down. Everyone is here. The grouping ceremony will now begin. All the participants' numbers will remain the same as in the preliminary round. I believe your teachers have already told you about the finals, so I won't repeat it. Now let's start the lot drawing. Every 10 people will form a group. After the lot drawing, you will head directly to the training field for the first round. As he spoke, a huge crystal ball slowly rose from below the platform. The crystal ball had a diameter of 1 meter and was hollow. There were 60 orange-yellow balls in it, and there seemed to be words on each of them. There were 6 hollow crystal pillars around the crystal ball, and there were 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 symbols on the top of the crystal ball. The old man didn't seem to do anything, but the 60 orange-yellow balls in the crystal ball suddenly jumped violently. Then, one by one, the balls were thrown out of the 6 holes around the big crystal ball, which are almost invisible to the naked eye, and fell right into the 6 crystal pillars. Because of the distance, the words on the balls couldn't be seen clearly. However, the participants sitting in the meeting hall, apart from Kerr, all of them stared at the crystal pillars with their eyes wide open, trying to find their numbers. Soon, all 60 balls entered the crystal pillars. There were exactly 10 balls in each crystal pillar. The old man on the platform said calmly, I am the Deputy Temple Master of the Warrior Temple, the Director of the Berserker Hall. This time, the lot drawing will be supervised by the Deputy Temple Masters of the Temple on the 2nd floor. If there are no problems, I will announce the results of the lot drawing. On the 2nd floor, Ruo Shui's gentle voice sounded, Everything is normal. Temple Master Run, please announce the results. Ren Wuquang nodded towards the 2nd floor with a smile on his face. He walked in front of a crystal pillar, and 10 orange-red balls leaped out of it. They lined up in a row and floated in front of him. The first group of the finals will be held at the Sanctuary Alliance's training field, the Knights Training Field. The names of the first group are as follows. Knight number 1, Warrior number 2, Warrior number 67. When he heard Knight number 1, Long Haochen looked towards Yang Wenjiao. It was obvious that this was the group that Yang Wenjiao was in. He really hoped that his name would appear in this group, but it was a pity that things didn't go as he wished. His name didn't appear in this group. The names of the first group has been announced. Please stand up. The staff will bring you to the competition venue to begin the first round robin. Yang Wenjiao and the rest slowly stood up and left under the lead of the staff. Before he left, he took a look at Long Haochen and Kair with a hint of regret in his eyes. Just like how Long Haochen wanted to challenge him again, he also wanted to challenge Kair with his full strength. The second group of the finals will be held at the Sanctuary Alliance's training field, the Magic Training Field. The names of the second group are as follows: Knight number 98, Assassin number 1, Priest number 18, Mage number 1. When Lin Xen heard 98, she was obviously nervous and excited. She looked around and whispered to Long Haochen, "Little brother, who do you think Assassin number 1 is? He's a grade 5 assassin. Do you think I have a chance?" At the same time, she glanced at Lin Xen. "Isn't he the Mage number 1? Long Haochen shook his head and said, "Big sister, you can definitely do it. Do your best." Kair sat there, her expression as cold as ever. Other than when she was alone with Long Haochen, she was always like this. When Rinhua Kuang announced that the second group would follow the staff to the Magic Training Field, Lin Xen hurriedly stood up. On the other side of Long Haochen, Lin Xen wasn't the only one who stood up. Kair also stood up. "I'll go first," Kair said softly to Long Haochen. Long Haochen clearly remembered that in this group, there seemed to be only one person who called out assassins, and that was the assassin number 1. Kair's soft voice sounded in his ears again. "Be careful during the competition. Don't get injured again. After the competition, I'll wait for you there." "Wow, little sister Kair, so you're number 1 assassin number 1. Come, let me pull you along." Lin Xion's personality was straightforward and enthusiastic. She didn't hesitate to pull Kair's bamboo, cane, and walked out. Kair paused for a moment, but when she remembered that Lin Xian was Long Haochen's big sister, she followed her. Lin Xian rubbed his forehead and smiled bitterly. "What a headache! It seems like luck isn't always on my side." The overall strength of the second group was much stronger than the first group. His information network was much better than the other participants. The number 1 assassin number 1 was actually the little blind girl beside him. This was something he didn't expect. It was said that she was the only grade 5 assassin in the Temple of Assassins. In one round of the competition, she challenged 11 other participants at the same time. In the end, no one dared to fight her. What kind of strength was that? And that number 18 from the Temple of the Priests. She was the champion of the Temple of the Priests in the preliminary round. While Lin Xian was feeling gloomy, Long Haochen also saw that the shiny bald man in front of him also stood up. His tall and sturdy figure didn't have the slightest hint of a priest's appearance as he followed the staff with large strides. Most of the participants were gloating. There was no doubt that the second group was a group of death. Number 1 assassin, number 1 sorcerer, and 2 number 1s from the 6 great temples were in this group. The others were not weak either. The ones who were the most excited were those from the Temple of Assassins. None of them were in the same group as Kair. It would be strange if they were not in a good mood. The third group of the finals. The venue is the Warrior Trial Field. The list is as follows: number 1 Summoner, number 2 Sorcerer, number 97 Knight, number 23 Warrior, number 13 Assassin, number 16 Assassin, number 18 Assassin, number 24 Assassin. There were actually 4 assassins in this group of 10. Moreover, it sounded like this group was not weak either. The mysterious number 1 from the Temple of Souls would be in this group. There was also the number 2 from the Temple of Magic. When the 4 assassins stood up and followed the staff out, their expressions, which were originally rejoicing, instantly turned ugly. That's right, they were not in the same group as Kair. But who did they see? Wasn't that the one who was sitting with number 1 just now? Although the Knights Templars and the Temple of Assassins had blocked the news, these assassins who were able to enter the top 10 were all elites of the younger generation. Naturally, they all had masters behind them. They vaguely knew that the sudden tension between the 2 Temple of Assassins a few days ago was because number one assassinated a participant from the Knights Templars. And the reason was actually because of another participant from the Knights Templars. Without a doubt, it was this Knight 97 in front of them. Looking at Long Houchen's handsome face that could even be described as peerless, the assassins were even more certain of their guess. He wailed in his heart. If they were to win against the 97th Knight, or even injure him, would it be? Naturally, Long Houchen did not know what these assassins were thinking. As he followed the staff out, he also observed the participants in his group. The ones who caught his attention the most were the two girls. The petite one seemed to be even younger than him. She looked weak and delicate. She looked at the other participants in her group curiously from time to time. Occasionally, her face would show a hint of shyness. She was wearing a strange blue robe. The other girl was much taller. She was at least 7 meters tall. Her black ponytail made her look neat and tidy. Her features were picturesque. She looked gentle and lovely. However, she was carrying a giant shield on her back that was even taller than her. As the length of the shield was longer than her height, she could only carry the shield horizontally. Other than the top of the giant shield, the curves on both sides were all in the shape of a sharp blade. The two curves finally intersected to form a sharp point. It looked like the entire shield was a giant sharp blade. The thickest part of the shield was probably about a foot. There were 9 holes the size of a fist on the front. It was empty inside. I wonder what it's used for. How heavy is this shield? Even a knight like Long Houchen looked a little scared. However, the girl seemed to be carrying it as light as a feather. The Sanctuary Alliance Executive Office was not far from the Sanctuary Alliance Great Trial Field. Soon, they arrived at the Warrior Trial Field. After drawing lots again, the order of the competition was determined. The group competition would last for 9 days. There would be 5 matches every day. The 10 participants would have to fight with the others. The final ranking would be based on the number of wins. The top 2 had appeared. If the third place had a high number of wins, he would have a chance to advance. As it was a round-robin competition, drawing lots was not very important. After a simple draw, the first match of the finals began. The finals of the Monster Hunters Challenge were even more deserted than the preliminaries. There were fewer people watching from the rostrum. There were only 6 people. However, what the participants did not know was that these 6 people were from the 6th Great Temple. They were in charge of supervising the process of the competition to ensure the fairness of the competition. Before the competition officially began, Long Houchen and the other 9 participants were given a name list. There were no numbers on it, only their names. Long Houchen's first opponent was a member of the Assassin Temple. Her name was Xing Xian. Her name sounded feminine, but in fact, she was a skinny young man with a wretched appearance. First match, Long Houchen versus Xing Xian. Enter the competition. All the referees of the finals were 7th grade experts. Judging from the attire of today's opponent, he should be a 7th grade combat king from the Warrior Temple. With a shield in his left hand and a sword in his right, Long Houchen slowly walked into the arena. In their group, most of the participants were from the Assassin Temple. There were 4 of them, 2 from the Temple of the Priests, and 1 from each of the other 4 temples. Compared to the second group, Long Houchen felt that his luck was not bad. He had a good chance of entering the top 2. Because the arena is not suitable for assassins, 4 pillars will be raised to cover their figures to ensure the fairness of the competition. It was unknown how the mechanism was activated, but thick stone pillars slowly rose from the ground with a creaking sound, and only stopped when they were 50 feet high. With these 4 pillars, which required 2 people to hug, it was much more advantageous for assassins. Otherwise, in a flat training field, they would not be able to display their speed, dodging, and hiding abilities. The petite Xing Xian's eyes flickered as she looked at Long Houchen, full of wariness. He was complaining in his heart. Why did I have to fight him first? If it was someone else, they could at least see Big Sister Number One's reaction. Forget it, let's test him first. Begin. Following the referee's shout, Xing Xian did not advance but retreated instead. He instantly turned into a black shadow and disappeared behind a pillar. For an excellent assassin, the most important thing was to never let the enemy find his exact position. Long Houchen stood there without giving chase. A golden mist of light slowly rose and surrounded his body, shining with a gentle radiance. It was charging. In the third group, the knight was the only one. Naturally, the other participants did not know what kind of fighting style he had. This charging skill was extremely rare. Even among the Knights Templars, not everyone knew about it, let alone the people from the other temple. Apart from the Magic Temple's number 2 and the female warrior with the giant shield, everyone else was confused. They did not understand what Long Houchen was doing. When Long Houchen was charging, his movements also changed. His left hand held the radiant shield in front of his chest, his right hand pointed the lightsaber diagonally to the ground, his feet in front and one behind, ready to react at any time. Xing Xian hid behind the pillar and quickly changed his position. At the same time, he was also observing Long Houchen's movements. Although he did not know what charging was, an assassin's perception had always been very high. He could clearly feel that Long Houchen was becoming more and more dangerous at an alarming rate. Without a doubt, he was using some kind of skill. The longer he used it, the more powerful it would be. There were almost no weaklings in the finals. Xing Xian could not care less about what Big Sister Number 1 thought. His battle instincts made him react in the shortest time possible. In a flash, he had already leapt into the air and landed on a stone pillar to the left of Long Houchen. As he leapt, it could be seen that there was a membrane connecting his arms and ribs. This was a special equipment for assassins. It was called the Wind Riding Wings, and it could produce a gliding effect for a short distance. When attacking an enemy, it could also be used to change direction. It was the favorite equipment of assassins below grade 6. Breath control. An assassin's required skill. Like a leaf, Xing Xian floated to the ground without making any sound. His whole body was practically sticking close to the ground as he flew towards Long Houchen. Not only was the entire process fast, there was not even the slightest sound of breaking through the air. Long Houchen maintained his original posture of accumulating power. The golden mist around his body grew stronger and stronger. Xing Xian's speed was extremely fast. In just a few blinks of an eye, he had already reached Long Houchen's back. His body exploded, and a pitch-black dagger appeared in each of his hands. The left dagger stabbed towards Long Houchen's back, while the right dagger slashed towards Long Houchen's neck. Of course, if Long Houchen did not react, he would not really slit his throat. After all, this was just a competition and not a battle to the death. In the instant that Xing Xian's daggers attacked, Long Houchen moved. His left foot quickly took half a step forward, only half a step. Then his shoulders shook and his whole body fell to the left. At the same time, he used his left foot as a fulcrum, and his body spun rapidly. His whole body went from facing Xing Xian to facing him. Xing Xian's throat slash naturally missed without any effect, and the dagger that stabbed towards Long Houchen's back just happened to graze his chainmail, leaving a series of sparks on the chainmail, but did not pierce his body. Shield block. Long Houchen used this skill when his center of gravity was not stable at all. The radiant shield of light exploded with a golden light, and a thick layer of light instantly expanded from the shield, turning into a large shield with a diameter of 2 meters and directly collided with Xing Xian. Rank 5. In just a moment, Xing Xian judged Long Houchen's cultivation. To be able to use shield block with such power, there was only one explanation, and that was rank 5. He did not have the time to think about anything else. His body instantly curled up in the air, and at the same time, he released his spiritual power. The daggers in his hands flew forward and simultaneously pierced the radiant shield of light. With a bang, Xing Xian's whole body was sent flying. Long Houchen's cultivation had officially entered the realm of the rank 5, and the shield block using liquid spiritual power was not something that Xing Xian could withstand, not to mention that it had the ready effect. It was like punching a fly. How could a fly resist? However, assassins also had their advantages. In that short period of time, although Xing Xian received a relatively strong impact, he also used the momentum to jump back, dispersing most of the impact. Although both his arms were already numb, at least he was not really injured. Assault, the knight's rank 5 skill. Long Houchen did not move, but when he did, he was like the wind, and his aggression was like fire. At the same time that he forced Xing Xian back, his whole body had already launched an assault like lightning, directly chasing after his opponent. A light sword swept through the air, and a golden blade of light instantly slashed out. It was light severing sword. At this time, Xing Xian did not have any place to borrow strength in the air, and coupled with the fact that his whole body was numb from the shield block, it was easier said than done to dodge. If he was hit by Long Haochen's rank 5 light severing sword, he would immediately lose. With his cultivation, Xing Xian once again proved to everyone that there were no weaklings who could enter the finals. Facing such a disadvantageous situation, he suddenly spread out his left arm, and the wind-wielding wings under his ribs extended. His body actually used the wind-wielding wings to quickly deflect, narrowly avoiding Long Haochen's light severing sword. Both his feet landed on the ground, and with a quick bounce, he instantly disappeared behind a stone pillar. Long Haochen's face revealed a trace of surprise, but he did not give chase. His feet stopped, and just like before, he once again used ready. Looking at his calm and tranquil appearance, it was obvious that he was not the least bit anxious. Hiding behind the stone pillar, Xing Xian was gasping for breath. No wonder he could become Big Sister Number One's friend, a rank 5 expert. An assassin of the same rank would already be at a disadvantage against a knight, not to mention the difference in cultivation between the two. In just one exchange, he had suffered quite a bit. Moreover, looking at Long Haochen's dignified appearance, he did not seem to be tempted at all. If he cannot fight head-on, perhaps he would have a chance by moving about. Thinking of this, Xing Xian was even more unwilling to go out. If I don't take the initiative to attack you, no matter how strong your ability to gather spiritual energy is, what use is it if you can't find me? Thinking of this, Xing Xian once again changed his position and bluntly crouched there without moving. Long Haochen did not seem to be worried that he would not be able to find an opponent. Not only did he not stop his ready, but he also slowly closed his eyes. The competition grounds immediately fell into a state of silence. However, the judge did not stop the competition from continuing. As a rank 7 combat king, he naturally understood the ready skill very well. Once Long Haochen finished accumulating all of his spiritual energy, if he did not launch an attack, his spiritual energy would naturally dissipate, and he would lose the competition. This judge also wanted to see what Long Haochen could do. What he did not understand was why Long Haochen did not move, and instead chose to use this ready skill. Was it really beneficial to do so? Xing Xian, who was hiding in the dark, had been observing Long Haochen's situation. The more he observed, the more he did not dare to go out. Long Haochen's entire body had turned into a brilliant golden color because of the ready skill. The light element was terrifyingly dense and could erupt with an incomparably tyrannical attack at any time. Xing Xian had no other choice. He could only continue to hide and continuously use the assassin's breath control skill, not daring to make the slightest movement. Moreover, he also saw that Long Haochen's eyes were closed. However, with Kaier's tyrannical closed eyes attack in front of him, how could he dare to be careless? Time passed by, and Long Haochen's ready skill lasted for a full 2 minutes. It seemed that 2 minutes was very short, but it was actually silent for 2 minutes during the competition, and this was not normal. At this moment, Long Haochen finally moved. The dense light surrounding his body quietly disappeared, and the light sword in his hand was raised. A blazing white light burst out, and in the time it took to take a breath, his light sword had become completely incandescent. Holy sword, because the ready skill had brought him a huge amount of concentrated spiritual power. When he used the holy sword now, he actually didn't have to go through the process of ready. Long Haochen's gaze turned towards a stone pillar. It seemed that he had already locked onto his target. Xing Xian, who was hiding, let out a huge sigh of relief. The stone pillar that Long Haochen was looking at was the exact opposite of where he was. Although the strength that Long Haochen had displayed was extremely strong, if his ready skill failed, perhaps he would still have a chance of winning. It would be best if it ended in a draw. That way, he wouldn't have to worry about Big Sister Number One being dissatisfied. Just as Xing Xian was calculating in his heart, the light sword in Long Haochen's hand had already slashed out. The blazing white light transformed into a huge light blade that swept across the sky. What made Xing Xian incomparably shocked was that although Long Haochen was looking in a different direction, the light blade was pointing towards his position. Impossible! How could he find me? This was the only thought in Xing Xian's mind. However, how could he still dare to continue hiding at this time? Only the heavens knew how sturdy the stone pillar was. Even the warlord felt a certain amount of pressure from the holy light slash that Long Haochen had unleashed with the holy sword, let alone Xing Xian. That oppressive feeling made his heart subconsciously filled with fear. Xing Xian forcefully kicked off the stone pillar with both feet, and his entire body flew horizontally in an attempt to dodge Long Haochen's attack. However, at this moment, a red light suddenly flashed in Long Haochen's eyes, and Xing Xian, who was flying horizontally not far away, was instantly covered in a layer of red. Chapter 32. Knight's six-step technique lock-on. Even someone of young Wen Zhao's strength had suffered quite a bit from this lock-on, not to mention Xing Wan, whose cultivation was inferior to Long Haochen's. No matter how strong his dodging ability was, the moment the lock-on was completed, the holy light chop instantly turned in midair, chasing after his body and chopping down. For an assassin, what they feared the most was the knight's lock-on. When an assassin's cultivation reached the sixth step, they would be able to learn invisibility, which would restrain the lock-on. However, this lock-on appeared quickly and disappeared just as quickly. It only flickered for a moment, then dissipated. Because Xing Wan continued to fly horizontally, the holy light chop could only fly forward without the lock-on's guidance, directly exploding into the ground. Pooh! The yellow earth suddenly lit up. Immediately after, the other contestants saw a shocking scene. On the ground, a 50 feet long and 30 feet deep gully had appeared. Moreover, the surrounding yellow earth had all turned brown. It was obvious that it had been burnt by the light elements. A strong light element aura rapidly reverberated in the arena. Xing Wan's feet landed on the ground, his eyes flickering with bewilderment. Just a moment ago, he had thought he was going to heaven. Now that he turned to look, when he saw the huge gully, his clothes were instantly soaked in sweat. If such a tyrannical attack had landed on his body, not even his bones would have been left. Without a doubt, it was Long Haochen who had voluntarily removed the lock-on, preventing the attack from truly landing on him. In his extreme shock and nervousness, he practically blurted out, "I admit defeat. Many thanks to elder brother-in-law for showing mercy." Long Haochen had thought of him admitting defeat, but the way he addressed him made Long Haochen stare blankly. Elder brother-in-law? What elder brother-in-law? Long Haochen wins. The referee announced Long Haochen's victory, while looking at him with an astonished gaze. Even this seven-step powerhouse could not see how Long Haochen had accurately located Xing Wan's position. Of course, they didn't know that Long Haochen's mental strength was different from ordinary people's. He wouldn't be able to find an assassin who could use breath control. However, the Star Jade had started to dodge and hide in front of him. Long Haochen relied on his high perceptive sense to keep track of the Star Jades. He closed his eyes so that he could focus and make an accurate judgment. This was also the reason why he could calmly use stored power. The appearance of a rank 5 knight had caused the other contestants in Group 3 to be on high alert. In their eyes, Long Haochen had yet to release his mount. If such a Tier 5 knight were to have a powerful mount, his strength would definitely rise to another level. The most gloomy ones were the assassins. Lockdown. This brother-in-law actually had the level 6 knight skill, Lockdown. How were they supposed to fight him? There was no doubt that they could only fight for second place in the group. At the same time that Long Haochen's side won the first round, the second group's match was also in full swing. Second round, Lin Xin Sima Xian fight. Lin Xin didn't recognize the bald priest. He walked to the center of the training field while sizing up his opponent. This was a priest's robe, but this guy was a little too muscular. Shouldn't a priest's body be relatively weak? With a doubtful heart, Lin Xin walked to the center of the field. Sima Xian wasn't as nervous as him. This bald priest never knew what fear was. Holding his thick staff, he strode to the center of the field. The referee said in a low voice, "Because priests aren't good at attacking, as long as they can defend for 10 minutes without being defeated, they win. Begin." The most important role of a priest in a team was to heal and support. Therefore, it was extremely unfair for a priest to compete in combat. That's why the Monster Hunters preliminaries had such a rule. Lin Xian gave Sima Xian a smile that he thought was the most handsome. "Hello, Brother Sima. I'm number 1 in the Magic Temple and the first place in the Magic Temple preliminary. Why don't you admit defeat? If I hurt you, wouldn't it affect your later matches?" Mages were recognized as the strongest in the Sixth Temple. Priests were most afraid of assassins, followed by mages. Lin Xian was telling Sima Xian that his attack was very strong and he couldn't handle it, so he should admit defeat to save himself from embarrassment. If it was another priest, they might really be scared by his title as the first place in the Magic Temple preliminary. But would Sima Xian? Although this guy was a priest, he only had violence in his heart. "Admit defeat, my ass. I'm still the first place in the Temple of the Priests preliminary. I'm coming." As he spoke, Sima Xian strode towards Lin Xian. The light gold gem on top of his black staff lit up and a dense holy aura spread, showing his priest attribute. "This guy is really stupid," Lin Xian thought to herself. She raised her right hand, and the flaming cloud crystal staff appeared in her hand. The dense fire element instantly surged, and the sticky fire element caused the air around him to turn light red. Lin Xian was not the only one who was shocked. Even Kair frowned as she sensed the dense fire element in the air. She pointed the flaming cloud crystal in front of her, and a huge flame shield appeared in front of Lin Xian. It was a level 2 flame shield skill. However, it was cast by Lin Xian. The flame shield was 3 feet tall and 5 feet wide. It completely blocked his body behind it, and the dense fire element heated up the air in the arena. Sima Xian's heart trembled, but he did not stop charging. With a loud shout, he smashed the staff in his hand towards the fire shield in front of him. "Is this a priest?" Lin Xian's eyes widened. The other participants in the third group had the same thought. With a pu sound, the fire shield shook violently. The place where it had been smashed was clearly dented, and there were many fine cracks around the dent. Sima Xian did not stop. He swung the huge staff up and down. Bang, 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 bang. A series of attacks hit the flame shield, and sparks flew everywhere. The flame shield could not take it anymore. Lin Xian then reacted and cursed. F***CK. The Unravel raised it again. He did not chant a spell, but a dense ring of fire appeared. It was the resistance ring of fire. Just like the flame shield, this resistance ring of fire was at least twice as big as its normal form. However, at this time, the golden gem at the front of Sima Xian's staff suddenly lit up, and a circle of white light vibrated out. It collided with the resistance ring of fire. Holy light explosion. The resistance ring of fire and the holy light explosion collapsed at the same time. Sima Xian swept the staff in his hand. Bang! The flame shield collapsed. Lin Xian was a level 5 magician, while Sima Xian was only level 4. There was a gap in spiritual power between the two. Moreover, Lin Xian's control over the fire element was extremely strong. The moment the flame shield collapsed, another flame shield appeared. At the same time, he released another resistance ring of fire. This time, he successfully knocked Sima Xian back. Is there a mistake? Isn't this guy a warrior? A warrior wearing the skin of a priest. Lin Xian was speechless. He muttered a few incantations. Suddenly, 6 golden red fireballs shot out like lightning. Just when everyone thought he was going to attack, the 6 golden red fireballs stopped in 6 different directions around his body. Then, they slowly revolved around his body. A layer of thick golden red light subsequently appeared. Elemental fire shield. I want to see how you can break my defense. Lin Xian couldn't help but angrily shout. Sima Xian disdainfully curled his lips. Elemental fire shield is nothing. It can break you all the same. As he spoke, he let out a loud roar and rushed forward again. The staff in his hand danced up and down, giving off a great momentum. At the same time, a huge holy light hammer appeared from time to time and fiercely bombarded the elemental fire shield. For a moment, in the training field, fire and golden light constantly exploded. Strong spiritual power fluctuations constantly surged in the field. Sister Lin Xin, why don't I understand? Kai, asked Lin Xin with a bit of confusion. Lin Xin bitterly smiled. Don't say that you don't understand. I don't even understand what's going on. In a battle between a mage and a priest, the priest is the main attacker and the mage is the main defender. This is really strange. This is definitely a strange battle. The bald priest Sima Xian's staff flew up and down. Like a dragon coming out of the sea, it constantly bombarded Lin Xian's defense. Lin Xian also stood firm. He continuously released one defense after another. No matter how hard Sima Xian attacked, he didn't move. But he still didn't release any attack skills. Lin Xian occasionally added a defense with the fire cloud crystal in his hand. He somewhat proudly said, Baldy, you can't take it anymore. Why don't you break my defense? Let me see how you break it. Humph, Sima Xian coldly snorted. What's there to be proud of? I use physical strength to attack you, but you consume internal spiritual power. Sooner or later, your spiritual power will be exhausted. At that time, I want to see how you can block my attack. In fact, he also felt strange in his heart. With Lin Xian's powerful spiritual power, if he used a few tyrannical attack spells, he probably wouldn't be able to block it. Although he was good at attacking, he didn't have any defensive abilities as a priest. But this guy still didn't attack. Why? Lin Xian disdainfully curled his lips. He opened his left hand. With a flash of light, a crystal bottle appeared in his hand. You want to exhaust my spiritual power? You're simply daydreaming. Brother has medicine. Do you see that? Every pill in this bottle can restore 200 spiritual power. Let's see how long your physical strength can last. Sima Xian's eyes widened. You're clearly cheating, Lin Xian said proudly. What do you mean by acting shamelessly? There's no rule against taking medicine in the tournament. Brother has medicine. Brother has medicine. Do you have medicine? What's more, with your little spiritual power, it's hard to say if you can force brother to take medicine. With the fire cloud crystal staff in hand and liquid spiritual power, low-level defensive spells could be displayed several times more effectively in his hands. Naturally, the consumption of spiritual power was much slower. It really wasn't easy for Sima Xian to break through his defense. Stop. At this time, the referee shouted to stop the two people who were in a stalemate. The match is over. Sima Xian wins. Lin Xian's face was full of rage. How'd he win? Referee, can't you see that he can't break through my defense? The referee looked at him unhappily and said, Are you a priest, or is he a priest? It's been 10 minutes. Do you understand? You two weirdos, hurry up and leave. Lin Xian just remembered that his opponent was a priest and not a warrior. The 10-minute time limit was up. It was just that he was defending and his opponent was attacking. Sima Xian also reacted and immediately laughed out loud without caring about his image. Wah, you idiot, brother's a priest. While walking to the side of the stage, Sima Xian imitated Lin Xian's arrogant look and voice and swayed his sturdy butt. Brother has medicine. Brother has medicine. The other 8 people who were resting at the side of the stage didn't know whether to laugh or cry. This pair of clowns. However, what they couldn't understand the most was why Lin Xian didn't use any attack magic from the beginning to the end. Only Lin Xian's heart was secretly moved. She remembered Yi Hua's words. This Lin Xian most likely didn't even know how to attack. Next match, Kai against Lin Xian. Both sides, please enter the stage. The referee seemed to have sent away the god of plague. Without hesitation, he announced the start of the next match. Looking at Kai, Lin Xian was really in a difficult position. This weak little girl was also blind. How could she do it? Kai, let's go on stage. Lin Xian had already thought about it. She was already very lucky to be able to enter the finals. It was almost impossible for her to get a ranking. Only by entering the top 16 would there be a possibility of getting a reward. It was obviously not that easy to break through from this group. Since that was the case, she might as well throw the match. That way, she could also explain to her brother. While thinking, she pulled Kaire's green bamboo cane and led her into the stage. Both sides stood still. Just when the referee was about to announce that the stone pillar was in favor of the assassin, Kair suddenly said, "No need. I admit defeat for this match." Lin Xian was immediately shocked. Little sister Kair lightly shook her head at Lin Xian. The green bamboo cane in her hand touched the ground, and she walked out of the stage. Lin Xian hurriedly followed her out. Winning without a fight was admittedly a good thing, but looking at Kair's somewhat staggering footsteps, she couldn't bear to see it. Little sister Kair. Lin Xian held her arm. "You don't have to admit defeat. I won't be able to enter the top 16 anyway." Kair smiled slightly. "Where there is a will, there is a will. Who knows, you might be able to enter the top 16. Just as the second group finished 2 consecutive matches in an abnormal state, the third group in the Warrior Temple was also in the midst of a strange match. "Chen Ying'er, Wang Yuan, please enter the stage." After his match, Long Haochen was about to leave immediately to wait for Kair. But when he saw the 2 people who entered the stage, he immediately stopped. Because the 2 people who entered the stage were the only 2 females in their group, and both had attracted the attention of Long Haochen. Chen Ying'er was the petite girl who looked very weak, and Wang Yuan was naturally the tall girl with the shield on her back. Bang! Wang Yuan placed her heavy shield on the ground with a dull thud. The surrounding yellow soil trembled from the impact, showing that the shield was not just for show. Chen Ying'er was startled, and her body trembled. "Wow, big sister, your shield is so heavy." Wang Yuan smiled slightly and said, "Little sister, you are from the Soul Temple, right? You have to be careful later. If you can't handle it, just admit defeat." Chen Ying'er nodded repeatedly, looking at the huge shield with a look of lingering fear. "Match start," the referee announced, and stepped back. Wang Yuan held the huge shield in her left hand and jumped up. Her legs moved at high speed, and in an instant, she charged towards Chen Ying'er. Her speed was so fast that it could even be compared to the knight's assault skill. The shield in her hand was shining with a rich green light. Facing Wang Yuan's lightning-fast charge, Chen Ying'er did not panic. Her hands made a gesture of holding her heart, and a huge crystal ball appeared in her palm. With a buzzing sound, a layer of gentle energy rippled out from the crystal ball, and a circle of rippling spiritual power spread out like a wave. Although Wang Yuan's speed was very fast, in the end, it was not as fast as the release of spiritual power. The layer of invisible ripples had already blocked her way when she was still 10 meters away from Chen Ying'er. "Ah, hey!" Wang Yuan shouted and raised the huge shield in her hand, with the bottom tip pointing forward. Under the drive of her arm, the huge shield actually flew into the air like a heavy axe and fiercely chopped at the invisible barrier in front of her. With a soft puff, Wang Yuan felt as if she was trapped in a piece of cotton. Her attack did not encounter any obvious resistance, but that soft cotton feeling instantly bound her. Immediately after, a soft elastic force sent her flying outwards. Together with her shield, she somersaulted in the air and landed steadily on the ground. What happened? Wang Yuan's eyes showed a look of surprise. She had fought with magicians before, but it was her first time fighting a summoner, and she had never encountered such a situation. It seemed that the seemingly harmless Chen Ying'er was not as easy to deal with as she looked. Chen Ying'er did not seem to see Wang Yuan's situation at all. Her eyes were fixed on the crystal ball in her hand, which was the size of a human head. A soft light blue light shone from the crystal ball, and suddenly, a light blue hexagram appeared on the ground in front of her. The spiritual power fluctuation was very gentle from beginning to end, but the moment the light blue hexagram appeared, Chen Ying'er's face suddenly became pale, and her body even seemed to be on the verge of collapse. Then, a door slowly rose from the hexagram. It was an extremely gorgeous door, 2 feet wide and more than 4 feet tall. When it rose from the ground, there seemed to be countless lights surrounding it, jumping excitedly. All kind of strange sounds also sounded. Insects chirped, birds chirped, dogs barked, tigers roared, dragons roared, and countless sounds made by countless creatures echoed in the training field. There were countless carvings around the gorgeous gate. They seemed to be magical beasts, and they all seemed to be very excited. However, it was impossible to clearly see what these magical beasts were. Around the door, there was a faint layer of light blue weapons, and from time to time, there was a trace of green light. Living Soul Gate. The referee, who was not far away, blurted out. He looked at Qin Inger, and his expression changed greatly. Long Haochen's eyes also widened. This was the first time he had seen such a strange scene. He recalled that when the list of names was announced, there seemed to be the number 1 summoner from the Soul Temple. Could it be this little girl who looked younger than him? This meant that she was at least a rank 5 powerhouse. And what exactly was this Living Soul Gate? The most nervous person was undoubtedly Wang Yuanyuan, who was in the middle of the competition. She was not in a hurry to attack, and her entire body curled up slightly. Indistinctly, traces of a domineering aura began to spread from her body, and an intense green light dyed her body and the shield in her hands. No one noticed that there was a huge gem in her left hand, and no one knew what it was used for. Open, Living Soul Gate. Spirits of all living things, heed my call. Return, my partner. Qin Inger's crisp voice rang out in the middle of the training field. Immediately after, circles of white light seemed to appear in the Living Soul Gate, and a white light shot out like a bolt of lightning, appearing in front of the door. Wang Yuanyuan had already raised the giant shield in her hand, and the gem in her other hand was ready to be stuffed into one of the 9 holes on the shield at any time. However, in the next moment, she stopped what she was doing, and at the same time, her mouth was wide open, as if she had seen something unbelievable. He was not the only one. The judges and the other contestants, including Long Haochen, all had the same reaction. Their mouths were wide open as they stared at the scene in front of them in disbelief. Yes, this was really too unbelievable. A summoned beast had indeed appeared in front of the huge Living Soul Gate. However, its body was completely disproportionate to the size of the Living Soul Gate. Meh, the summoned beast meowed softly, and its soft little body moved slightly, as if it was afraid of the atmosphere in front of it. It turned around and ran away. It came in front of Qin Inger and jumped towards her, as if seeking protection. That's right, it was a little lamb, and it looked like it was no more than a foot long. Its soft and slightly curly wool looked exceptionally cute. A pair of watery little eyes blinked, as if it wanted to drink milk. Qin did not know whether to laugh or cry as she picked it up from the ground and stamped her feet. What bad luck, bad luck! I admit defeat. The huge Living Soul Gate slowly disappeared into the ground. Qin Inger carried the little lamb, and under the dumbfounded gaze of Wang Yuanyuan, she walked away resentfully. Obviously, she was also very dissatisfied with her own performance. The judge did not know what to say. The moment he saw the Living Soul Gate, he was completely stunned. He knew about the Living Soul Gate. This was a powerful summoning magic in the Soul Temple, which could only be used by level 8 professionals with cultivation of Soul Emperor and above. Through the Living Soul Gate, one could communicate with extremely powerful creatures for their own use. The biggest advantage was that the summoned beast that was summoned through the Living Soul Gate would not be devoured, and would be completely under the control of the summoner for the duration of its existence. However, such a powerful level 8 magic was actually cast by the hands of such a little girl. How could they not be shocked? But in the end, they did not know whether to laugh or cry. She actually only summoned a little lamb. There was no doubt that this was another strange match, and it was quite a strange one. Long Haochen watched as Qin Inger walked out in front of him, and the corner of his mouth could not help but twitch. He suddenly remembered that a few days ago, he seemed to have heard from his teacher that a genius had appeared in the Soul Temple, and had once summoned a level 8 magical beast in a competition. It should be her, right? But she could summon a level 8 magical beast, so what was up with this little lamb just now? Wang Yuanyuan, who had won, was also confused. She quietly put away the gem in her hand, and walked out of the training field with a puzzled mood. Long Haochen was worried about Kair, so he did not stay any longer. After walking out of the training field with quick steps, he went straight to the place where he and Kair had agreed to meet. Because in the second group, the match between Lin Xian and Sima Xian had lasted for a full 10 minutes. So when Long Haochen arrived at the destination, Kair had not yet arrived. Finally, he had arrived early. Long Haochen let out a sigh of relief and stood there quietly waiting. He never knew that waiting could be such a thing that people looked forward to. "Duck, wait, duck." A light sound came from afar. Long Haochen's hearing was quite good, and he immediately caught this familiar and intimate sound. He raised his head to look. He just happened to see Kair walking towards him, and Lin Xian was also there, holding her arm. Seeing Long Haochen, Lin Xian even waved at him. Long Haochen. Long Haochen revealed a knowing smile. Just as he was about to greet him, suddenly, a blazing heat appeared without warning. The heat came from his forehead. Long Haochen only felt as if a huge furnace in the sky had suddenly enveloped him. The next moment, his mind was already blank. In the distance, Lin Xian was supporting Kair as they walked towards Long Haochen. Suddenly, she was shocked to see a purple light on Long Haochen's forehead. She could faintly see that the purple light had 9 branches. The purple light suddenly flashed, and just like that, Long Haochen disappeared into thin air. "What's going on? Haochen?" Lin Xian shouted anxiously. Beside her, Kair also immediately felt that something was wrong and hurriedly asked, "Sister Xian, what's wrong?" "Haochen." Haochen disappeared. Lin Xian pulled Kair and rushed to the place where Long Haochen disappeared. Her eyes were dull as she spoke. Not only were they shocked, but the passers-by who had just passed by, as long as they saw the scene, also let out cries of surprise. How? How could he suddenly disappear? Lin Xian said in disbelief. On the contrary, Kair was still relatively calm. She grabbed Lin Xian's hand and said, "Sister, don't be anxious. Tell me what happened." No matter how sharp her other 5 senses were, she couldn't see. Just now, she only felt a strange fluctuation of spiritual energy flash, and in the next moment, she heard Lin Xian's cry of surprise. Lin Xian carefully described what she had just seen. Hearing her words, Kair's expression also became serious. With her knowledge, she also didn't know what had happened. "Sister, how about this? You go back first and see if you can wait for Haochen to come back. I will also go ask the teacher. There must be a reason for this. Something must have happened." "Okay, I will inform you as soon as there is any news." Along the way, she already knew where Kair lived. Although Kair looked calm, the anxiety in her heart was no less than Lin Xian's. Long Haochen's disappearance was too strange. It couldn't be understood with common sense. She didn't return to her residence. Her green bamboo cane quickly tapped the ground, and she went straight to the Sanctuary Alliance's executive office. 10 minutes later, Kair was already standing in front of Ing Suifeng. Ing Suifeng frowned. "According to your description, that kid seems to have been teleported away by some kind of formation. Moreover, it was not teleported voluntarily. Then there are only 3 possibilities. First, he has signed a master-slave contract with some creature. He is the subordinate, and the master needs his help, so he is summoned away. Second, he is under some powerful curse, and the curse forcibly broke through space and pulled him away. Third, his equal contract partner is in danger, and he teleported himself to help. Although there are other possibilities, I can only think of these 3 for the time being. In that situation, since he was waiting for you, it is impossible for him to use something like a teleportation scroll. He is not a magician, and it is impossible for him to learn spatial teleportation magic. So, I guess the biggest possibility is that he was pulled away by his contract partner. You don't know what kind of mount partner he has." Kair shook her head blankly and immediately asked, "Grandpa Shadow, will he be in danger?" Ing Suifeng smiled bitterly. "This is hard to say. If he was really called away by his contract partner, then it depends on the strength of his contract partner. The stronger the contract partner, the greater the danger he may encounter. On the contrary, if the contract partner is weak, then the danger will be much smaller. This is hard to say. Not to mention you. Even a professional with my level of cultivation can't find him without accurate coordinates. He may be directly teleported to another space. So, it is useless for you to be anxious now. All you can do is wait for him to come back. Then what if he doesn't come back? Kair gradually clenched her fists. Ing Suifeng took a deep breath and said in a deep voice, "Then it proves that he is dead." Kair's body trembled. Then she turned around and left. "Girl, where are you going?" Ing Suifeng asked anxiously. Kair said without turning her head, "I am going to the place where he disappeared and wait for him. If it is, as you said, then when he comes back, he will definitely appear at the place where he was teleported to. That is his coordinates." Was Long Haochen really teleported away? The answer is yes. Moreover, just as Ing Suifeng expected, he was forcibly pulled away by his own mount partner using the contract. As his consciousness gradually recovered, a burning sensation spread throughout his body, and Long Haochen also came back to his senses. Cough, cough. As soon as he was teleported out, Long Haochen couldn't help but cough, because he inhaled a mouthful of extremely turbid air. The air contained a lot of dust and many manic magical elements. Just inhaling a mouthful made Long Haochen cough repeatedly. He subconsciously released a spirit light barrier to isolate himself from the outside air. Relying on the filtering effect of the spirit light barrier, he took a few mouthfuls of much cleaner air in succession, and only then did he slowly recover. Where is this? The forget-me-not ring on Long Haochen's hand shone like a mountain, and the light sword and the glorious shield of light had already appeared in his hand. In the face of danger, the first thing to do was to remain calm. First, he prepared to protect himself. After his breathing stabilized, he discovered that he was halfway up a mountain, and what he could see in front of him immediately gave him a strong shock. This was a world of black and red. The sky was dark and gloomy, and not a single star could be seen. In the air, there were dense dark and fire elements. There were also other elements, but they were very heterogeneous, not as abundant as the dark and fire elements. As far as the eye could see, countless places on the ground had traces of cracks, and it could even see rivers of interweaving magma. No wonder the temperature here was so high. While Long Haochen was shocked, his heart was also full of vigilance. How did I end up here? Subconsciously, he felt the scorching heat on his forehead. At this moment, a familiar call arose from the bottom of his heart. Long Haochen's heart shook violently, and he involuntarily blurted out, "How you?" He abruptly turned around, and only then did he see that there was a small cave behind him, and there seemed to be a faintly discernible light emitting from it. That's right, that's Hao Yue's aura. Long Haochen had now completely awakened from the teleportation process, and after putting another holy light barrier on himself, he quickly walked into the cave. The cave wasn't deep, and he soon saw Hao Yue. But the appearance of Hao Yue at this moment gave Long Haochen a big shock. Hao Yue was crouching there, and his aura seemed very weak. Both Light and Xiao Hua's heads were drooping on the ground. His body seemed to have grown a little bigger than when he left, and the bulge at his neck had also clearly swelled up a lot. However, there were at least dozens of cracks on Hao Yue's scales, and purple blood was faintly flowing out. The most peculiar thing was that layers of green light were constantly emitting from his body. Almost every 3 breaths, it would flicker once. "Hao Yue, how are you?" Long Haochen did not hesitate to release a holy light barrier on Hao Yue's body. The golden color of the holy light barrier continued to heal the wounds on Hao Yue's body. Hao Yue's spirit was roused. Light and Xiao Hua barely raised their heads to look at Long Haochen, and a series of information was transmitted to Long Haochen through telepathy. Hao Yue did not explain why he had become like this, and only told Long Haochen that this was the space he originally resided in, and that he was in the middle of evolving, on the verge of a final breakthrough. And at this time, he was at his weakest and needed Long Haochen's protection. As long as he completed his evolution, he could drink Long Haochen's drink and return to the holy demon continent. Hao Yue, don't worry about your evolution. I'll stand guard for you, Long Haochen said without the slightest hesitation. After once again releasing a holy light barrier on Hao Yue's body to maintain the continuous healing effect, he turned around and left the cave, standing guard at the cave's entrance. This was another space, and everything here was different from what he knew. It would be impossible to say that there was no fear in his heart. But for Long Haochen, Hao Yue's safety was more important. Hao Yue was his brother, and the blood of the other flowed in their bodies. If it wasn't for the extreme danger, how could Hao Yue have forcibly summoned him here? Chapter 33. Long Haochen sat cross-legged on the ground, still using the light barrier to protect his body, isolating the harmful air from the outside world, while silently absorbing the light elements in the air. This world was not a good place for Long Haochen, because the light elements here were pitifully small. It was not even 1% of the holy demon continent. He had to constantly filter the motley magic elements in the air in order to absorb a little bit. Long Haochen took out 2 bottles of medicine. One of the bottles was the pill that could increase spiritual energy by 200. Long Haochen named it the Spirit Recovery Pill. The other bottle could instantly stimulate one's potential and increase overall combat power by 20% for 30 seconds. The Spirit Explosion Pill could make one weak for 24 hours. In this place where he could not absorb more light elements, the effects of these 2 bottles of medicine could be imagined. Quietly standing at the entrance of the cave, Long Haochen carefully sensed everything around him, and at the same time, constantly observed his surroundings. At this moment, suddenly, a surge of spiritual energy came from the cave, as well as a strange aura of spiritual energy. In the next moment, a layer of purple light spread out, not only from the entrance of the cave, but also through the surrounding rocks and into the air outside. Hao Yue was breaking through. Long Haochen's heart tightened. Just now, Hao Yue had told him that once it completed its final breakthrough, the aura it emitted was likely to attract powerful magical beasts. This was the most dangerous time. With the appearance of this purple current, Long Haochen was surprised to feel a faint burning sensation in his body. Looking down, he saw that the blood vessels under his skin had turned a faint purple. A strong sense of power continued to grow in his body, and his physical strength continued to increase. At this moment, Long Haochen only felt that his external spiritual force was increasing at a rapid rate, and every move he made seemed to become more powerful. Did Hao Yue's evolution also cause my external spiritual energy to increase? Long Haochen only needed a little thought to understand what was going on. There was no doubt that this increase came from the blood contract. He and Hao Yue had each other's blood in their bodies, and with the effect of the contract, they were truly connected by blood. Therefore, when Long Haochen's cultivation increased, Hao Yue would sense it and gain some benefits. Conversely, when Hao Yue evolved, Long Haochen would also gain some benefits from it. It seemed that the stone ball that Hao Yue had been so eager to use was for its evolution. Just as Long Haochen was deep in thought, he suddenly felt the various magical elements in the air become extremely violent, especially the dark elements. It was as if the Milky Way was pouring down, crazily pouring into the cave behind him. At this moment, no matter how violent the spiritual elements were, they only had one goal, and that was the cave behind him. Long Haochen could even vaguely see a dark cloud in the shape of a vortex appearing in the middle of the heavenly banquet hall due to the suction of the cave, sucking in all the spiritual elements around like rivers running into the sea. Long Haochen could even vaguely see that because of the suction of the cave, a whirlpool of dark clouds had appeared, sucking in all the spiritual elements in the surroundings. Long Haochen was even more vigilant as he observed his surroundings. He didn't notice that on his forehead, the rune of the contract had appeared again. This rune had a total of 9 purple lines. Originally, among these 9 lines, the first 2 were especially bright, but now, the third rune also began to brighten. When a professional's cultivation broke through to the 3rd step, if they wanted to advance further, they would need internal spiritual energy. No matter how much external spiritual energy increased, it would not affect the advancement of the profession. In other words, even if your external spiritual energy reached 2,000, If your internal spiritual energy did not reach 2000, you would still be unable to step into the fifth step. Long Hao-Chen only felt that the warm feeling in his body that filled him with strength was constantly increasing, but he didn't know to what extent his external spiritual energy had reached. In his chest, the golden liquid whirlpool around the saint's spiritual stove didn't have the slightest change. This was the liquid spiritual energy that he had cultivated with great difficulty, and it was also the symbol of him entering the fifth step. After entering the fifth step, Long Hao-Chen clearly found that the speed of his cultivation had greatly decreased. If he wanted to increase his spiritual energy by 1 point, he would need to spend at least 10 times the time before. After a day of bitter cultivation, increasing 2 or 3 points of spiritual energy was already the limit. How could the knight know that if his cultivation speed were to be spread, it would absolutely frighten countless people? After breaking through to the fifth step, how could one increase spiritual energy by cultivating every day? If all professionals had this ability, then as long as they continued to cultivate, sooner or later, they would be able to break through to the sixth step. Along with the increase in strength, the benefits of Long Hao-Chen's Son of Light physique began to become more and more obvious. It was just that he himself hadn't realized it yet. For professionals, the fifth step was the threshold to becoming a strong expert. However, if they really wanted to cross this door, they would have to break through to the sixth step. This was because only after reaching the sixth step could they truly use the liquid spiritual energy, open the spiritual aperture, and increase the speed of liquid spiritual energy cultivation. Boom! A violent roar made Long Hao-Chen's tense nerves tighten again, and he looked down the mountain. When he saw the situation at the bottom of the mountain, he suddenly sucked in a breath of cold air. He saw skeletons, a large number of skeletons, and they were quickly heading towards the direction of the mountain. The roar just now was caused by a skeleton accidentally peeling off a large stone and smashing it down a mountain. These skeletons simply couldn't be seen clearly, and it was almost endless at a glance. The whole body was black, with different heights and sizes, but they were all in human form. They climbed up quickly, and their goal was obviously the cave behind Long Hao-Chen. Taking a deep breath, Long Hao-Chen took half a step back slightly, letting his body submerge into the cave. In this way, he didn't need to face the enemies from several directions at the same time, and only needed to focus on the front. There was no time to think about the reason for the arrival of the skeleton army. All he could do now was to do everything he could to resist these skeletons and buy enough time for Hao Yue. Inside the cave. At this time, Hao Yue's body was trembling violently. The scales on his body had completely cracked, and the effect of the holy light barrier that Long Hao-Chen had cast on his body before was completely gone. But whether it was little light or little fire, both clenched their teeth and refused to let out a scream, because they were afraid that their cries would affect Long Hao-Chen. The bulge on his neck had already grown as long as Little Light's and Little Fire's necks, and a bluish-green radiance was constantly flickering on it. Although Hao Yue's whole body was just a mess of flesh and blood, a purple light pattern was slowly emerging on his body. A large amount of spiritual elements from the outside was madly pouring into his body, and his whole body was constantly issuing a series of cracking sounds of bones breaking, as well as the sound of armor scraping against each other. Extremely unstable spiritual elements were wildly wreaking havoc on his body. An aura that would terrify even the ancient wilderness quietly rippled. Little Light's and Little Fire's eyes once again turned purple, ice-cold and merciless, brimming with a bewitching purple color. That mangled body was also constantly expanding. Bang! Long Hao-Chen's left hand slightly tilted the radiant shield of light, deflecting the black skeleton's heavy blade, while the light sword his right hand suddenly stabbed forward, striking the skeleton's chest. As he got closer, Long Hao-Chen could more clearly feel the terror of these black skeletons. Although they were only left with bones, their entire body was as hard as steel, and their strength was enormous. The eye sockets of the skulls were emitting dark red flames. When fighting them for real, Long Houchen discovered that the black color of these skeletons wasn't the original color of their bones, but was covered with a layer of dark attribute spiritual energy. With a nauseating stench, they continuously attacked him in a frenzy. At this time, Long Houchen was glad that he had the light attribute. Although these black skeletons' bodies were extremely hard, when the light aura emitted from his light sword and radiant shield of light fell on these skeletons, they were obviously very afraid. Once Long Houchen's attack fell on their bodies, they would immediately emit white smoke. It was very obvious that the light attribute had a strong restraining effect on these skeletons. Kacha, the light sword, was released, and 3 skeletons were successively cut down by Long Houchen, temporarily blocking the skeletons behind. After his internal spiritual energy was upgraded to liquid spiritual energy, the power of any skill he used would be significantly enhanced. Slightly gasping for breath, Long Houchen quickly swallowed a recovery spirit pill. His spiritual energy consumption wasn't actually that great, but facing the current situation, how could he dare to let his spiritual energy be consumed to a certain extent before replenishing it? Maintaining his peak state was the best choice. In the face of the skeleton army, he rarely used his skills and tried to save his spiritual energy as much as possible. This was not a one-on-one battle, nor was it a competition, but a real life and death battle. If he was a little careless, he would stay here forever. One by one, the skeletons were shattered in front of him. Although Long Houchen had the aura of one man holding the pass against 10,000 enemies, the skeleton army was endless. He simply could not see the light of hope. However, in this kind of battle, Long Houchen also gradually discovered the benefits of the Guardian Knight. The Punishment Knight's attack and burst were undoubtedly much stronger than the Guardian Knight. But in terms of sustained combat ability, it was obviously far inferior to the Guardian Knight. After the Guardian Knight applied several buff skills on himself, Long Houchen almost only consumed a little spiritual energy every time he killed skeleton. Moreover, what he had to do now was not to annihilate this skeleton army, which was impossible to accomplish. He just needed to buy enough time for Hao Yue. The biggest flaw of these black skeletons was that they were stupid. They had no intelligence, and they didn't have any skills. They just kept charging forward. In this case, Long Houchen could use the terrain and the aura recovery pill to hold on for a long time. A golden barrier of light rose up, protecting Long Houchen within it. The sudden increase in the density of the light element allowed him to recover some of his spiritual power. More importantly, under the protection of the Holy Light Shield, those skeletons didn't dare to rush forward for the time being. As soon as their bodies entered the range of the Holy Light Shield, the black on it would immediately melt. Long Houchen gasped for breath. It had been an hour. He had already persisted here for a full hour. His arms were so sore that he could hardly lift them, and he had to constantly urge his internal spiritual energy to nourish his body. He had already taken 6 aura recovery pills, but this kind of continuous fighting was far from simple consumption of spiritual energy. The burden on his body and mind was an important factor that affected his ability to continue fighting. Seeing that his arms were getting heavier and heavier, and the attacks of the skeletons were getting more and more fierce, Long Houchen had no choice but to activate the Holy Light Shield on his wrist. The Holy Light Shield, given to him by Yihua, could release the Holy Light Shield 3 times a day. Releasing it at this time, not only did it not consume his spiritual energy, but it also helped him recover his spiritual energy and treat the sore arm. Long Houchen's physical condition suddenly improved. However, the purple air emitted from behind him became more and more intense, and he could even vaguely hear Hao Yue's heavy breathing. "Hold on. I must hold on," Long Houchen secretly warned himself. "No matter what, I must block these skeletons for Hao Yue." Just when the Holy Light Shield was gradually dissipating, suddenly, a shrill roar sounded, and the skeleton army that was constantly charging suddenly stopped and separated to the left and right. A figure slowly floated in the distance. "Human, there is actually a human in the world of darkness and fire. Do you know who you are protecting?" The old voice was filled with a powerful pressure. The pressure that seemed to come from a soul made Long Houchen's heart suddenly tremble. He released another holy light shield and swallowed a aura recovery pill. The figure slowly floating in the distance was an old man. His brown robe was tattered. His face was withered and gray, without a trace of blood. His messy brown hair had long lost its luster. In his right hand was a withered bone staff, and under his feet was a dark gray cloud. His eyes couldn't be seen because there were two dark green flames burning in his eye sockets. He can actually speak human language? Long Houchen was surprised and even more vigilant. The ones I protect are my friends, my companions, Yizichin said. The old man coldly snorted. No, you are protecting the reincarnated Demon King, the creator of this darkness and fire. It is because of its existence that this world has become like this. Space cracked, and magma flowed on the ground. Countless races went extinct because of it. The powerful races escaped, and those who couldn't escape all became undead. Only undead can live in this world of darkness and fire. Human, I don't know what method it used to lure you here, but the aura of light on your body disgusts me, and your actions make me even more angry. I will give you a chance, scram back to your own plane. Today, Austin Griffin's aura just happened to appear in my territory. Although I'm only a corpse necromancer, I must kill it. Otherwise, no one knows what kind of destruction it will bring to our world after it recovers. Long Houchen looked at the corpse necromancer opposite him in confusion. He didn't quite understand the meaning of the other party's words. He just heard that Hao Yue is very dangerous, and even the culprit behind the destruction of this world. Hao Yue is my brother, my partner. I only trust him, Long Houchen said slowly. Why should he trust a corpse necromancer? A corpse necromancer leading an army of skeletons? As a light knight, undead creatures are his enemies. The corpse necromancer said coldly, if that is the case, then you will be buried with Austin Griffin. As he said that, he pointed the skeleton staff in his hand in the direction of Long Houchen. Suddenly, a mournful scream suddenly sounded. Long Houchen felt his whole body shake, and the blood in his body seemed to boil with this scream. His consciousness instantly became a little fuzzy. He didn't care about conserving spiritual power. He quickly raised the glorious shield of light, and at the same time, the grace of protection and the halo of faith fell on his body. The glorious shield of light could resist all negative effects to a certain extent, and it had a special defense against dark and undead magic. Both the grace of protection and the halo of faith were light attribute support skills, and they also had the effect of resisting negative skills. Sure enough, the impact of the scream suddenly decreased. Long Houchen's mind cleared up, and he did not hesitate to raise the light sword in his hand. Golden spiritual power flowed out of his hand like water and was injected into the light sword. The light gold on the light sword was gradually replaced by a holy white. Holy sword. Looking at the bright holy light on the holy sword, the ghost fire in the old corpse necromancer's eyes flickered, and he was obviously afraid. His cultivation was actually much higher than Long Houchen's, and the reason why he tried to drive Long Houchen away with words was because he was afraid of Long Houchen's light attribute. A series of difficult incantations came out of the corpse necromancer's mouth, and he pointed the skeleton staff down. Suddenly, countless skeletons broke into pieces, and the black bones fused together at an astonishing speed, and an extremely tall black skeleton gradually formed. Skeleton King, a powerful assembly-type undead summon creature. Its body was more than 6 meters tall, and in its right hand, there was a black bone blade that was 3 meters long. With a sudden leap, the huge bone blade went straight for the cave where Long Houchen was. Not good. Long Houchen did not dare to stay in the cave anymore. If the Skeleton King's bone blade hit the top of the cave, it was likely to cause the inside to collapse. He was going to be buried alive inside. Charge, halt, divine parry. Long Houchen's movements were extremely fast, and the radiant shield, which was completely disproportionate to the black bone blade, forcibly blocked the attack of the black bone blade. Amidst the loud bang, Long Houchen only felt that at this moment, all the bones in his body seemed to be shattered, and the blood in his body churned. The huge impact caused a crack to appear on the radiant shield in his hand, almost penetrating through the surface of the shield. What a powerful force! Even under the state of divine defense, Long Houchen's 7 apertures were bleeding, and it showed how powerful this black skeleton king was. The rocks under his feet cracked inch by inch. If not for his cultivation having broken through to the 5th order and the synchronized evolution brought by Hao Yue's evolution, he would probably have fainted from the impact. Holy Light Shield. Without hesitation, Long Houchen activated the Holy Light Shield on the wrist guard for the 2nd time, and, at the same time, threw a spirit explosion pill into his mouth. Leaping up, he put away the radiant shield in his hand, and the fire sword appeared. Using the 2 swords in both hands, he instantly accelerated with the help of divine defense. With a leap, he was already in front of the Skeleton King. Facing the Holy Light Shield that emerged from Long Houchen's body, the Skeleton King was also a little afraid. This was a natural elemental counter, and its movements were slightly sluggish. With a swing of the fire sword in his left hand, a light slash sword, and a golden light with a wave of flames ruthlessly slashed at the Skeleton King. Roar! The Skeleton King roared, and its upper body suddenly rose. The power of the light slash sword was nothing to it, but the light attribute on it caused white smoke to rise from its body, and it suffered intense pain. The ghost fire in the eyes of the Lich in the air flickered, and with a wave of its skeleton staff, the skeleton army immediately rushed towards the hole that Long Houchen had opened. At the same time, a pitch-black light shot out from the staff and landed on the Skeleton King's body. Immediately, the Skeleton King's bones became even darker, and there was a faint layer of fluorescence emitting from it. The tyrannical aura caused Long Houchen's movements to stagnate a little. Boom! The black bone blade ruthlessly slashed the ground. With the guidance of the fire sword, Long Houchen was able to deflect the blade, but because of the huge force from the black bone blade, his entire body was tilted to the side. His entire body instantly rolled on the ground, and then he bounced back up, shouting angrily, "I'll fight you to the death." In the air, the Lich's haggard face revealed a trace of disdain. Although the attributes on this human's body caused him to feel fear, he was still far from being strong enough. He couldn't threaten him. The Skeleton King was really too strong, and in the face of its attacks, Long Houchen could only think of ways to dodge and dodge, not daring to face it head-on again. And when his attacks landed on the Skeleton King, only the light attribute could cause some damage. But with the Lich watching from the side, he couldn't cause any substantial damage to the Skeleton King. Moreover, Long Houchen had already seen skeletons rushing into the hole, and his expression became even more anxious. He constantly tried to fight the Skeleton King, but every time he was subdued by its powerful strength. The Lich no longer looked at Long Houchen, and it was only a matter of time before the Skeleton King killed him. His gaze fell in the direction of the hole, and the ghost fire in his eyes flickered, revealing a perturbed and somewhat uneasy emotion. That's Austin Griffin we're talking about. Do I really have the ability to kill it? If I can kill it and absorb its bloodline, then how strong will I become? Will I become the next Austin Griffin? When that time comes, I might even be able to rely on my will to traverse the various planes. Just as the Lich was wondering if he should enter the cave now, a strong suction force suddenly pulled his body sideways in the air, causing him to fall towards the waist of the mountain. What's going on? The Lich was shocked, and he subconsciously looked at his body. Suddenly, he discovered that a white light without the slightest energy fluctuation had appeared on his body without him noticing. This white light looked very gentle, but the suction force was extremely strong. The Lich's necromancy could command an army, but he was a creature that relied on magic after all, and his body was extremely weak. In the face of this suction force, it was impossible for him to break free with just his physical strength. Dark green light instantly burst out of the corpse, and he tried to use the corrosive power of necromancy to cut off the strange energy entangling his body. Unfortunately, his hopes were dashed. The seemingly gentle milky white energy had no reaction to his necromancy at all. Boom! the Skeleton King's black-bone blade slashed the ground again. This time, it almost brushed past Long Houchen's body. Long Houchen's golden armor exploded with a faint golden light, and the armor on his back was completely taken away. However, the white light that had pulled the lich overcame from Long Houchen's chest. It was precisely because he had paused for a moment that he had almost been hit by the Skeleton King. When the lich looked at Long Houchen again, there was no trace of anxiety, fear, or anger on his face at all. There was only extreme calmness, steadiness, and intense killing intent. Not good. A strong sense of fear welled up in the lich's heart, but he could no longer change anything at this point. Two dense rays of golden light erupted from Long Houchen's body at almost the same time. The holy light barrier of the spiritual light bracer for the third time, as well as the rising formation released by the fire sword stabbed into the ground, forcefully blocking the Skeleton King's attack. The intense light attribute even caused the Skeleton King to stagger for a moment. Meanwhile, the light sword in Long Houchen's right hand, which he hadn't used to attack all this time, finally came out. All in one throw, Punishment Knights, rank 5 skill. Holy Sword, Punishment Knights, rank 5 skill. The Holy Sword had already been prepared. All or nothing was something that Long Houchen had learned after breaking through to the 5th Order and breaking through another seal on the Inheritance Ring. The Sword of Light turned into a brilliant white light and went straight for the lich. No, the lich let out a mournful roar, and a dense dark green light erupted from its body in an attempt to block the Holy Sword's radiance. However, the Holy Light attribute was too powerful against undead creatures. How could the Holy Sword that Long Houchen had been accumulating for a long time and had been strengthened by the Spirit Explosion Pill? If they were 25 meters apart, Long Houchen's sword might not have been enough to deal a fatal blow to the lich. However, they were less than 10 meters apart now. The Holy Sword was too fast under all in one throw, and it didn't give the lich any time to release its powerful defensive skill. Puff! The Holy Sword instantly pierced through the dark green barrier. All in one throw caused the Holy Sword's power to multiply. This sword already had the powerful attack power of a Radiance Knight. The holy white light penetrated the lich's chest, and the lich in the air suddenly froze. At that moment, Long Houchen had already exhausted all his strength. When he used all in one throw to throw that sword, his body was already limp on the ground. The Skeleton King's black bone blade was like the kiss of the Grim Reaper, and Long Houchen was about to be cut into two. Puffed. The Skeleton King's body suddenly stiffened. Just as the bone blade was a few meters away from Long Houchen, its huge body instantly collapsed and turned into countless bones that fell from the sky. Many of them smashed on a Long Houchen's body. The skeleton army that had rushed into the cave was also completely frozen. One by one, they collapsed and turned into bones on the ground. A faint smile appeared at the corner of Long Houchen's mouth. The armor in front of him hadn't completely shattered yet. Although the bones that fell from the sky hurt him, they didn't cause him any real harm. Success. Long Hao Wu clenched his fists tightly, even though his current physical condition was very bad and very weak. The after effects of the Spirit Explosion Elixir had also started to show gradually, but his spirit was still quite excited. Long Houchen wasn't familiar with undead creatures at all, let alone had any knowledge of them. However, his abnormal mental strength allowed him to have an observation ability that was far superior to ordinary people. Be it the Lich or the Skeleton King, their true strength was above Long Houchen's. Long Houchen wouldn't be able to resist either one of them. However, being weak didn't mean that he couldn't win. What Long Houchen had just performed was a classic example of the weak defeating the strong. When the Lich appeared, Long Houchen felt that he was the same as the skeletons, afraid of his light attribute. Otherwise, he would only need to kill him directly. What was the point of wasting time talking? When the Lich summoned the Skeleton King, Long Houchen also saw some of the characteristics of undead creatures. Without a doubt, this undead army was obviously summoned by the Lich. Otherwise, he wouldn't be able to casually turn the skeletons into a powerful Skeleton King. This information might seem useless, but to Long Houchen, who was good at thinking, it pointed out a path to survival in the midst of death. That was, as long as he killed the Lich, all the summoned creatures would end. First, it was to show weakness. When he blocked the Skeleton King's attack for the first time, although he used Divine Defense to block, he didn't have a shield to deflect the force. One reason was to test the Skeleton King's attack power, and the other was to paralyze the Lich. As it turned out, the Skeleton King was even more powerful than he had imagined, directly injuring him. But Long Houchen didn't regret it. At least he blocked it. If he couldn't even block one attack from the Skeleton King, then his plan wouldn't need to continue, because he wouldn't have the slightest chance. Afterwards, he kept moving around, cutting a sorry figure to avoid the Skeleton King's attack, not daring to fight it head-on. In fact, he was always halfway up the mountain, approaching the direction of the Lich. The Saint's spiritual stove's evolution was comprehensive. First of all, the original 25 meters of attracting attacks became 50 meters, and it could attract the attention of 2 targets instead of 1. More importantly, after the Saint's spiritual stove's evolution, it gained another ability. That was traction. Attracting was to attract the enemy's attention, and traction was to pull. The Saint's spiritual stove's traction power was equivalent to Long Houchen's own pulling power with all his strength. This ability still couldn't attack or defend, but it was extremely practical. It was equivalent to an invisible noose on Long Houchen's body, able to pull anything at any time. The traction distance was 25 meters, and it could only target one target. The Lich flew in the air. Long Houchen had always tried to approach it because of the Saint's spiritual stove's secret skill. He had never used the power of the holy sword accumulated in his right hand. In the end, the Lich's carelessness and contempt towards Long Houchen buried its life. Compared to the human world where everyone was deceiving each other, this Lich was really a bit naive. And Long Houchen's Saint's spiritual stove was the most important weight to change the situation of the battle. The Lich's will-o-wisp pulsated at an obvious rate, and it was weakening at an extremely fast rate. It looked at the light sword in its chest, then looked at Long Houchen on the ground. Suddenly, it let out a shriek. It was as if it couldn't accept this fact. No, the ceiling pillar is no longer there. Don't tell me that after Austin has experienced 6 resurrections, he's really going to descend again? Rulers of the Netherworld, why haven't you arrived yet? Destroy it, heaven's wrath. Along with his hoarse shout, the holy light on the light sword had already spread to its entire body. White specks of light instantly shattered from the cracks, and finally condensed together, bringing a bright light to this world of darkness. Long Houchen lay on the ground, gasping for breath. An intense feeling of weakness constantly rushed into his brain, although it wasn't as intense as the side effects of using the sacrifice skill. The spirit explosion pill had increased his fighting strength by no less than 20%. The current backlash was not light. The Lich and its skeleton army had been eliminated, but it was still not safe yet. Long Houchen struggled to eat another spirit recovery pill, trying hard to recover some spiritual power. Right at this moment, a deep and resounding roar suddenly resounded, followed closely by another roar. When a third roar sounded, the sound was clearly somewhat weak. However, its majesty was not the slightest bit weaker than the previous 2 roars. Hearing this roar, Long Houchen was not alarmed. Instead, he was delighted because the sound had come from within the cave. A warm flow of energy surged from within his body, and Long Houchen felt his weak body suddenly regaining its strength. When he looked down, he was surprised to find that on his body, purple lines were flashing. Those were his own meridians. Regardless of whether it was the main meridians or the thin blood vessels, they were all emitting a purple halo. A strong feeling of power continuously emerged, and the continuous increase in his physical strength formed a sharp contrast with the weakness of his internal spiritual power. Another roar rang out. This time, it was much louder than the previous 3 roars. A figure darted out of the cave like lightning, and before Long Houchen could see it clearly, it had already arrived in front of Long Houchen. A golden light flashed, and a gentle light element sprinkled on Long Houchen's body. Immediately after, Long Houchen felt his body lighten, and a burning sensation spread from his forehead. Everything around him turned into a strange purple color. His mind went blank again. In a world of darkness and fire, purple light flashed, and space opened and closed in an instant. With a flash of light, the purple light had already disappeared. Almost in the next second, an extremely cold voice suddenly sounded. Austin Griffin. This voice was extremely sharp, and when it appeared in the air, the originally black sky instantly turned a vast gray. On the ground, the flowing magma instantly dried up, and the originally hot air suddenly became cold. "We're late." Another deep and resounding voice sounded, and a large number of black silhouettes appeared in the distance. A huge silhouette quietly appeared from behind these black silhouettes. That huge silhouette was actually a huge bone dragon that was over 30 meters long. The bone dragon skeleton was a strange bluish-white color. Its main body skeleton was white, but there was a layer of lustrous blue light on the outside. Its skeleton was strong, and under its huge wings, there was also a solid skin membrane. Around the bone dragon's body, the sticky dark aura was like a dark cloud, turning into a black halo that slowly spread outwards. Chapter 34. The eyes of the bone dragon flickered with blue flames, its incomparably tyrannical aura comparable to the Type 9 powerhouses of the Holy Demon Continent. On the back of this bone dragon sat a man shrouded in pitch-black armor. This person was over 5 meters tall, quietly sitting where the neck and back of the bone dragon met. In his right hand, he held a heavy sword that was even longer than his height. The heavy sword shone with a dazzling dark purple light. The vast gray sky suddenly tore apart, and a slim figure appeared. His body was shrouded in a large black cloak, and one could only vaguely see 2 scarlet flames dancing within the hood. Yes, we're all too late. I rushed here as soon as I received news of the little necromancer, but I was still too late. He was the owner of the shrill voice. A year ago, when we found Austin Griffin, he had just reincarnated. In order to avoid our pursuit, he must have been extremely weak after using his innate ability, and his evolution speed was greatly reduced. However, in such a short time, how'd he grow a 3rd head? At this speed, I'm afraid that in less than 100 years, the wrath of heaven will descend again. Necromancer Knight, do you have a way to find him? The Necromancer Knight said coldly, "As the Lich King, even you can't cross planes to search. How can I? Austin Griffin has already gone to another plane. However, every time he evolves, he must return to the space where he was born. We can only wait for the next opportunity." The Lich King said coldly, "What are the others doing? Do they think that this time Austin Griffin will be easily destroyed by us like the previous 6 reincarnations? He has already grown a 3rd head and is becoming more and more difficult to deal with. We need to convene a meeting of the undead lords and think of something together." "All right. On this matter, I stand on the same side as you." Ever since Austin Griffin forcefully broke through the seal pillar, causing the earth to crack and the sky to collapse, his main body died. With the strength of the wrath of heaven, he can at most reincarnate 9 times. As long as we destroy him this time, and hold on for another 2,000 years, he will never be able to descend again. At that time, we might be able to open a passage to other planes. Leave this place of destruction and loneliness forever. The Lich King was a little surprised. "I didn't expect that even the most indifferent of you would be afraid of loneliness." "Aren't you afraid?" The Death Spirit Trial Knight snorted coldly. The huge bone dragon beneath him suddenly turned around, and a thick black color spewed out from the bone dragon's body. In the next moment, he had already disappeared. The Lich King stared coldly at the cave that Haoyue had been in. In the next moment, a huge purple bubble appeared, and the entire mountain instantly melted. The Lich King's body disappeared along with the grayness in the air. Long Houchen's body trembled when he felt his feet on solid ground. He looked at himself and found that the purple hue under his skin had completely disappeared, disappearing into his body. However, the negative effects of the spirit explosion pill seemed to have disappeared, and it didn't take 24 hours to wear off. The purple color around him slowly faded. Long Haochin was surprised to find that he was surrounded by darkness. It seemed somewhat familiar. "Where's this?" "Long Haochin," a surprised voice called out. Immediately after, Long Haochin saw two familiar figures. Tuck, tuck, tuck. With Lin Xian's help, she and Kai walked over quickly from the side. Long Haochin finally realized that he had returned to the holy city. When he looked down, he immediately saw a big guy crawling under him. He looked at Kai, with some vigilance. This is Haoyue? Long Haochin was a little stunned. The thing crawling under his feet could definitely be considered a big guy. It had 4 thick and powerful limbs, and its body was more than 4 meters long. Moreover, it was much thicker than the original Haoyue. If the original Haoyue was like a big lizard, then now it was like a huge crocodile, and it had 3 heads. That's right, 3 heads. Apart from Little Light and Little Fire, Long Haochin also saw that the third head's eyes were green. But like Little Light and Little Fire, its eyes were also full of affection for Long Haochin. Seeing that Long Haochin was looking at them, the 3 big heads immediately came over and rubbed against Long Haochin. "Haoyue, it's all right. Kai is my friend." Long Haochin didn't have time to carefully observe Haoyue's changes. He hurriedly took 2 steps forward and greeted Kai, with a face full of shame. "Kai, I'm sorry. I stood you up again." He didn't find any objective reason for himself. It was already so late. It was obvious that Kai, and Lin Xian had been waiting here for his return. Long Haochin only felt warmth in his heart, and his eyes were even a little warm. This feeling of being cared for was undoubtedly what he longed for the most. Kai didn't blame him. She subconsciously raised one hand to hold Long Haochin's hand, and a gentle spiritual energy entered his body. Long Haochin didn't guard against Kai in the slightest. At the same time, his other hand pressed down on Haoyue's big head. Kai said softly, "Fortunately, you're not injured. But why did you consume so much spiritual energy? Are you all right?" She couldn't see Long Haochin's current expression, but from the examination of his body and his breathing, she could also determine that he was fine. It was just a slight injury. Long Haochin said, "I'm fine. Haoyue was in some danger. I want to help him." Kai gently shook her head. "It's okay. I don't blame you. It's good that you can come back safely." In her view, a magical beast companion was nothing more than living in some mountains and rivers. If they encountered an enemy, they would summon Long Haochin. She didn't think too much about it. On the contrary, Lin Xian on the side doubtfully said, "Long Haochin, is this Haoyue? How did it become so big? Hey, it even has an extra head. It's so strange." Long Haochin gestured her to keep quiet. He lowered his voice and said, "Haoyue is likely to have evolved. Let's go. It's already so late. Let's go back first." Kai was relieved that Long Haochin had returned safely. Lin Xian and Long Haochin first sent her back to her residence, and then returned to their own residence with Haoyue. The bedroom wasn't big. After Haoyue's body had doubled in size, it suddenly seemed a little small, but it refused to go out to sleep. Its 3 big heads just pestered Long Haochin, its eyes full of gratitude and kindness. It was like a child getting close to his father. Okay. Isn't it my duty to help you when you're in danger? You don't have to be embarrassed." Long Haochin stroked Haoyue's 3 heads with a smile on his face. Although the battle against the necromancer and the skeleton army still made his heart beat faster, he didn't regret it at all. He was a guardian knight, and Haoyue was his family. Naturally, he had to protect it. Long Haochin now had time to carefully observe the changes after Haoyue's evolution. It could be said that Haoyue's evolution was comprehensive. Its body doubled in size and became much thicker. When it stood up, it was almost 5 meters tall. It had thick and powerful limbs, sharp claws, and 3 big heads. It was quite majestic. The scales on its body had also changed. Each scale was oval, but there were diamond-shaped protrusions on it, which made the scales look thick and solid. Its whole body remained black, but under the light of the outside world, there would be a faint layer of deep purple. The volume of the protrusions on its back had also greatly increased. It seemed to have increased along with its body size. The changes on Hao Yue's three big heads were the most obvious. Its head was angular, and there were several protrusions on both sides, middle, and back. It was like a connected horn, but the protrusions were not very obvious. However, their eyes had also become larger, and their mouths had become sharper from their original round shape. Most importantly, its head had become a size bigger. Because of the blood contract, Long Haochen could clearly feel that Hao Yue had become stronger. It was much stronger than before. If it was a direct confrontation, he might not be able to defeat it. This was clearly a sign of entering the realm of a level 6 magical beast. Wasn't this kind of evolution too scary? It had not even been a year since Long Haochen and Hao Yue signed the contract. Its first evolution was obviously because of Long Haochen's blood, and its second evolution was completed by itself. It should have something to do with eating the stone ball. This was not the key point. The key point was that every time Hao Yue evolved, its strength would increase greatly. When it had 2 heads, it had become a level 4 magical beast from a level 2 magical beast. Now, it had 3 heads, and it had become a level 6 magical beast from a level 4 magical beast. Whether it was from his father or his teacher, Long Haochen had never heard of any magical beast that could evolve at such a rapid speed. Moreover, Long Haochen suddenly discovered that at the base of Hao Yue's neck, there was still a protrusion on the side of the neck with the green eye. On the other side, there was also a protrusion on the side of Xiaohua. In other words, after this evolution, there was an additional protrusion on both sides of its neck. Could it be that it could grow 2 more heads? If that was the case, what level of existence would it evolve into? Towards Hao Yue, Long Haochen was now more and more curious. Hao Yue could sense Long Haochen's thoughts. The 3 heads looked at him. Xiao Guang was the first to come up and directly stuck out his tongue to lick Long Haochen's face, washing it. "Haha, don't lick me, it's ticklish." Xiaohua and the new head immediately joined in. The 3 big heads and Long Haochen began to laugh. At the same time, Long Haochen also sensed the message from Hao Yue. The next evolution would be much more difficult than this one. It would indeed undergo a qualitative change, but the degree of evolution would not be as great as now. After all, the evolution of a magical beast from the 6th to the 7th level was much more difficult than from the 4th to the 6th level. As for the other evolution situations, Hao Yue did not say much. From the message it transmitted, Long Haochen could only feel that Hao Yue was telling him that no matter what it would become in the future, he would always be its kin, companion, elder brother, and even father. It was already late at night. When Long Haochen washed his body and entered into a state of cultivation, Hao Yue had also fallen into a deep sleep. Although its evolution was complete, its body was very weak at this time. It was obvious that all of its energy had been used to evolve, and it would take time for it to recover to its peak state. Hao Yue also told Long Haochen that the new head's attribute was wind. Long Haochen named it Little Blue, just like the color of its eyes. The next day, early morning, the sunlight shone into the room from the window. Long Haochen, who was in the middle of cultivation, slowly woke up. Bathed in the warm sunlight, his eyes could not help but reveal a trace of disappointment. In his mind, he unconsciously recalled the world of darkness and fire. Compared to that, the holy demon continent was simply heaven. Through the window, looking at the gentle morning sun, Long Haochen's heart suddenly surged with happiness. Hao Yue occupied Long Haochen's bed, sleeping there without a care for its image. Because the bed was not long enough, its body was curled up there, and its tail was still in Little Light's mouth. In the eyes of others, perhaps it looked ferocious, but in Long Haochen's eyes, they were always silly. Walking forward and touching each of the 3 heads, Long Haochen did not wake them up. He quietly walked out of the bedroom to wash up and eat breakfast. Today, he still had a competition to participate in. When Long Haochen walked out of the bedroom, Hao Yue's 3 heads opened their eyes at the same time. They looked at each other, and the 3 different colors of the eyes rippled with a faint layer of warmth. The corners of its mouth rose, and it closed its eyes again, and its breathing became even again. Stretching his body, his internal spiritual power still felt a little weak. When he returned last night, it was already late at night. The short cultivation did not allow Long Haochen's spiritual power to recover to its peak state. However, he could clearly feel that his body had become a lot tougher, and his strength had also increased significantly. It seemed that he should really find an opportunity to test his external spiritual power. He ate breakfast with Lin Xin and Yihua. Although Yihua could not go to watch the competition, he still stayed behind. At least, he wanted to wait until Long Haochen finished all the competitions and joined the monster hunters for real before he would consider returning to Haoyue City. Xinair said that Haoyue came back, and it even evolved. Yihua asked Long Haochen in a low voice. Long Haochen nodded. Yihua asked curiously, "How much did it evolve to? Is it because of that thing you mentioned last time?" Long Haochen said, "It should be. Otherwise, I can't think of how it could evolve again in such a short time. Teacher, I feel that Haoyue is really not ordinary. After this evolution, it can already be equivalent to the level of a level 6 beginner magical beast. Moreover, it has another attribute." Yihua smiled and said, "For you, this is a good thing. The stronger Haoyue is, the more help it will be to you. It can come back at the beginning of the finals, and it will be of great help to you. You will have a much easier time in the next competition." Long Haochen laughed and said, "Haoyue is still a little weak now. Before it fully recovers, I will not let it participate in the competition with me. Teacher, it is getting late. Sister and I should go." Yihua nodded and said, "You guys go." Long Haochen and Lin Xin said goodbye to Yihua and went in the direction of the great trial field of the Sanctuary Alliance. Looking at their backs as they left, Yihua let out a soft sigh. Haochen is a good child, but he's too soft-hearted towards the people around him. He pays too much attention to family. Warrior Trial Field. When Long Haochen walked into the trial field, he recalled the situation of yesterday's round-robin draw. Today, the opponent he was going to face seemed to be the second contestant from the Magic Temple, a level 5 magic shooter. There was no doubt that this would be a tough battle. He left early yesterday, so naturally, he did not know the results of the following matches. After entering the door, he asked around and found out that his opponent today also won the match yesterday. Just like him, he defeated an assassin. After finding a place to sit in the resting area, Long Haochen's gaze swept across the surroundings. What attracted his attention the most were still the two girls in his group. The lowly summoner looked sullen, as if she was still recalling the embarrassment of summoning a little lamb yesterday. Wang Yuanyuan sat there and wiped her huge shield. Her eyes were full of tenderness, as if she was caressing the body of her lover. Of course, Long Haochen would not think that the lowly summoner could only summon a sheep. First of all, she was definitely the #1 summoner, which proved that her cultivation had reached level 5. Secondly, she was able to enter the finals, which proved that she was at least in the top 10 of the Summoning Temple's preliminary round. When the Living Soul Gate appeared yesterday, that shock Long Haochen would never forget. Although it was only a dramatic appearance of sheep in the end, could the Living Soul Gate really only summon sheep? I'm afraid it's not that simple. Without thinking too much, Long Haochen sat down and immediately closed his eyes, allowing himself to enter a meditative state. Last night, he had consumed too much spiritual power. Although the feeling of weakness in his body had disappeared because of Haoyue's evolution, the spiritual power in his body could not be changed. However, he couldn't change the fact that he had overdrawn his spiritual energy with the Spirit Explosion pill. He had to recover as much as he could. Later, his opponent would be the second contestant from the Magic Temple, who was undoubtedly a level 5 magic shooter. Yihua had once taught Long Haochen that the higher the cultivation of a magician, the stronger their overall strength would be. Simply put, a level 2 magician was definitely not a match for a level 2 warrior. However, when a magician reached level 5, even 10 warriors of the same level might not be able to contend against them. Magicians had powerful attack power and the ability to control the battlefield. An outstanding magician was the main fighting force and explosive point of a team. The first match was between two assassins. The competition between assassins focused on speed and control. Basically, whoever hit their opponent first would be the one to obtain the final victory. As a result, the match ended very quickly. Before the others could even see how they won, the match was already over. Second match, Huang Yi versus Long Haochen. The referee's voice woke Long Haochen from his meditative state. On the other side, the silent magician also slowly stood up. He was also very handsome. The lines on his face were even as gentle as Long Haochen's. He was slightly taller than Long Haochen. He was not as high profile as Lin Xin, but his every movement seemed to follow a certain trajectory. Long Haochen's eyes moved slightly. This opponent was probably not easy to deal with. From Huang Yi, he felt a similar threat to Yang Wenjiao, just not as strong as Yang Wenjiao. For the sake of fairness, the battle between the knight and the magician will be 50 meters apart. The referee directed Long Haochen and Huang Yi to maintain the distance between each other. Only then did he announce, "Match start." This time, Long Haochen did not choose to accumulate his strength. In a battle with a magician, he had to constantly get closer to his opponent. Compared to a powerful attack power and the ability to control the battlefield, a magician's body was relatively weak. Once the knight got close to him, the outcome was basically decided. Charge! Long Haochen's speed suddenly increased. In his left hand, the radiant shield fell into his control, and in his right hand, the fire sword was replaced. He had lost his light sword in the battle with the necromancer last night. Therefore, to be precise, he only had one sword now. The radiant shield itself had the ability to repair itself. However, after being heavily injured last night, it had not fully recovered. There was still a shocking crack on it. Long Haochen did not even have any armor on him. The Skeleton King's blade had completely destroyed his light attribute armor. Seeing Long Haochen take out his equipment, Huang Yi frowned slightly. However, his movements were not slow at all. A short and thick magic staff appeared in his hand. The whole body of the staff was yellow crystal. It was unknown what material it was made of. There were simple and unadorned lines on it, and a brownish-yellow spherical gem was embedded at the top. When Huang Yi took out the magic staff, circles of earthy yellow halos were immediately emitted. A low incantation sounded from Huang Yi's mouth in a strange rhythm. The magic staff in his hand pointed in the direction of Long Haochen. Suddenly, a yellow ray of light shot into the field, spreading out a yellow halo. Long Haochen's perception was extremely high. He immediately felt the danger. His body that was charging forward came to an abrupt stop. The tip of his toes touched the ground, and he made a sideways, dodging movement. Dong! A huge wall of earth suddenly drilled out of the ground without warning. If Long Haochen had maintained his previous forward momentum, he would have slammed into this wall. Wall after wall of earth continuously surged out of the ground. No matter how Long Haochen changed his direction, there would always be a wall in front of him, preventing him from moving forward. After a while, even his line of sight was blocked by these mud walls. These earth walls were 6 feet wide, 3 feet tall, and more than 2 feet thick. It was not easy to break through them. Just when Long Haochen's vision was blocked, Huang Yi's movements paused for a moment. A ball of yellow light surged out of his chest. This ball of light did not attack or defend. Instead, it floated up and landed on Huang Yi's left shoulder. One could vaguely see that it was a small person with a pair of transparent wings on its back. It was only the size of a palm and looked extremely cute. However, the voice that came out of its mouth was not so cute to Long Haochen. The clear and melodious chanting and the low voice from Huang Yi's mouth maintained the same rhythm, but the content of the chanting was completely different. Hearing the two voices at the same time, Long Haochen was also stunned. At this time, he had just bypassed the 2 earth walls and could see the scene on the opposite side. Earth Elemental Spiritual Stove? Seeing the small person on Huang Yi's shoulder, Long Haochen was shocked. For a magician, the most practical was an elemental spiritual stove. Every magical element had the possibility of producing a spiritual stove. Once one had an elemental spiritual stove, then this spiritual stove could transform into an elemental spirit to assist the owner in battle. Generally, elemental spiritual stoves could undergo 3 evolutions, and the best ones could even undergo 4 evolutions. Among all the elemental spiritual stoves, the only one that could be used by the knight was the light spiritual stove. The strength of an elemental spirit was closely related to the owner. Owning it was equivalent to having an additional caster, and the spiritual power used was still the owner's own. Simply put, an elemental spirit could also borrow the spiritual power of the host to cast spells, attacking, defending, or assisting the host at the same time. With the evolution of an elemental spiritual stove, their biggest characteristic was that they could increase the power of magic and reduce the consumption of spiritual power. A magician with an elemental spiritual stove was as welcome as a guardian knight with a saint spiritual stove. Although Huang Yi's earth elemental spiritual stove was only of the lowest grade, it was already very helpful to him in battle. Whatever magic he knew, the earth elemental spirit would certainly know. He couldn't let it drag on any longer. Once the magic strength of the two was fully displayed, he would have no chance of winning. Long Haochen made a prompt decision, no longer attempting to go around the earth wall, and brazenly charged forward. The fire sword in his right hand flashed, and a golden-red radiance like the sun brazenly shone. Glorious sun slash. Boom! An earth wall was smashed in front of his tyrannical, glorious sun slash. His charging momentum didn't stop in the slightest. With a sudden burst of speed, he changed from charging to assaulting the opponent. The liquid spiritual power made the glorious sun slash far stronger than before. The earth wall was also a 4th-grade magic, and the glorious sun slash was the knight's strongest 4th-grade offensive skill. Facing Long Haochen's sudden eruption, Huang Yi's expression didn't change. One after another, earth walls appeared in front of Long Haochen, blocking his charging speed. The glorious sun slash flashed continuously, and Long Haochen didn't stop for even a moment. With his current physical condition, if he allowed Huang Yi and his earth elemental spirit to fully display their strength, he would almost certainly lose. With a violent roar, one earth wall after another was smashed under the glorious sun slash. Long Haochen took firm steps, constantly closing the distance between them. Feeling the power of the glorious sun slash, everyone in the 3rd group, including Huang Yi, was indescribably shocked. This glorious sun slash seemed to be the guardian knight's skill, right? There were no other knight here, so naturally, they didn't know that Long Haochen was a guardian and punishment dual cultivator. Soon, the distance between them was only 20 meters. Just a little more, and Long Haochen's long-range attack would have the ability to hit his opponent. However, it was also at this moment that the earth elemental spirit's clear and melodious chant came to an abrupt stop. A huge earth yellow halo appeared in front of Huang Yi. Elemental summoning magic? Startled, Long Haochen's body came to an abrupt halt. The surrounding earth on the ground gathered towards the halo at an astonishing speed, impressively forming a 4-meter-tall body. That thick and sturdy body directly pounced towards Long Haochen. Earth Giant, a Tier 5 elemental summoning spell. Among the Tier 5 Earth-type spells, it was in existence at the highest level. It was no wonder that it required such a long chant. When this spell was cast, Huang Yi's face paled slightly. It was obvious that he had consumed a lot of spiritual energy. Meanwhile, the earth elemental spirit on his shoulder stopped chanting. Instead, its body emitted a layer of earth yellow light that enveloped Huang Yi. It was actually helping him recover the spiritual energy he had consumed. Spirit gathering, an elemental spirit's innate ability. It could rely on its high affinity with the natural elements to help its master rapidly absorb mana to replenish their energy. One could just imagine how important an elemental spirit was to a magician. Although the earth giant in front of Long Haochen wasn't as frightening as the Skeleton King he had faced last night, its defense was even higher than the Skeleton King's. At the very least, it didn't fear the light attribute. Moreover, Long Haochen wasn't in his peak state right now. Clang, horizontal shield, divine block. With a loud bang, the earth giant was repelled. A golden light of light's vengeance appeared on Long Houchen's body. He stepped forward with his left foot, and the fire sword instantly erupted. Light severing sword. A huge blade of light with a rich golden red glow cut through the air, ruthlessly striking the earth giant's body. Long Houchen's movements were extremely fast. It was as if there was a halo under his feet, and his body suddenly rose. This light-severing sword was not only tyrannical, but more importantly, its blade was wide and thick. Pooh! A long gash suddenly appeared on the earth giant's body. However, Long Houchen's expression changed slightly. The light-severing sword left a gash from its shoulder all the way to its crotch. However, although this gash looked very destructive, in reality, it was only an inch deep. For an earth giant that was more than 4 meters tall and had an incomparably heavy body, this was nothing. Moreover, the reason why the earth giant was known as the strongest earth magic of the 5th grade, how could it be so simple? Both of its feet emitted a rich earthen yellow light, absorbing the surrounding earth element to replenish itself. The gash on its body was closing at an alarming rate, and in the blink of an eye, it had disappeared. Out of all the elemental giants summoned, the earth giant was most proficient in defense. Long Houchen's pupils suddenly shrank, and he made up his mind. He could feel that his body was lacking spiritual energy. If he had enough spiritual energy, then he was confident that he could use his techniques to gradually destroy this earth giant. However, he did not have that much time right now. Huang Yu was watching from the side, like a tiger watching its prey. As long as the earth giant could delay him for a while, allowing Huang Yi to recover his spiritual energy to its peak, then there would be no need to continue this battle. Right now, Long Houchen did not even have half of his total spiritual energy. Although it was in liquid form, it could not be sustained for long. What a pity! Long Houchen glanced at the radiant shield in his left hand, which had a larger gash, and turned his body halfway in the air. His flaming sword fiercely slashed at the earth giant's fist. The earth giant's body was as hard as steel, and Long Houchen used the rebound force to launch himself into the air. His flaming sword fiercely slashed at the earth giant's head. The earth giant's defense was indeed very strong, but its movements were relatively slow. The flaming sword instantly left a deep gash on its head. Then, a scene that shocked all the participants appeared. Long Houchen's body was in the air, shield in his left hand, and sword in his right. His whole body spun in the air as he continuously bombarded the earth giant. The blinding golden red light was like a giant meat grinder that continuously bombarded the earth giant's body. Killing Circular Sword, a powerful attack skill that Long Xingwu had created. The essence of Killing Circular Sword was to borrow strength and momentum. From a certain point of view, it was somewhat similar to the Storing Force skill, but it was an enhanced version of the Storing Force skill. It was most suitable for attacking fortifications, but it was not suitable for dealing with agile opponents. This was because as long as it did not continuously hit its target, the opponent would not be able to continue accumulating attack power. Clearly, the earth giant did not have the ability to dodge the Killing Circular Sword. Even with Yang Wenjiao's strength, once he was stuck by the Killing Circular Sword, he did not have enough time to instantly dodge and continue to attack. He could only choose to face it head-on. A shocking scene unfolded. Long Houchen, who was spinning in the air, was like the scythe of the Grim Reaper, constantly sweeping at the earth giant's body. The earth giant could only clumsily try to attack him, but it was constantly borrowing strength and momentum. Earth and stone flew into the air. The earth giant's body was constantly being cut open, and under the Killing Circular Sword's sweep, its body was being cut down at an alarming rate from top to bottom. Unexpectedly, it was actually ground to dust by Long Houchen, just like that. Pooh! The final blow completely shattered the earth giant's body. The instant the Killing Circular Sword finished its final momentum, a golden light was flung out like a waterfall, flying straight at the somewhat dazed Huang Yi in the distance. Huang Yi was a second-tier magic shooter. If one didn't consider that extremely unreliable fellow who couldn't attack, he would be the true champion of the Magic Temple's preliminary round. He had only learned the Earth Giant spell not long ago. He had never imagined that a fifth-tier opponent could destroy it so quickly. That was an Earth Giant, not an Earth Wall. The Earth Giant's defense should be able to resist even a sixth-tier opponent for a while, right? Two yellow rays of light appeared in front of Huang at almost the same time. Both were Earth Walls, cast by him and the Earth Elemental Sprite respectively. Boom! Boom! Two explosions rang out in succession. The flying golden light actually destroyed the two Earth Walls in succession, its momentum not weakening, and continued to smash towards Huang Yi's chest. A layer of khaki-colored light film suddenly appeared with the staff in Huang Yi's hand as the center. The golden light collided with it and finally shattered. When the golden light collided with the barrier, it finally shattered into dozens of golden rays. At this moment, Huang Yi clearly saw that the ambush was coming at him was the radiant shield in Long Haochen's hand. Unfortunately, this shield was completely destroyed. In this situation, Long Haochen was also helpless. Although the sword of battle, killing revolving sword was powerful, he only had a flaming sword in his hand. Meanwhile, the sword of battle, killing revolving sword required him to use dual weapons. Hence, although the radiant shield couldn't do much damage, it needed to be used to complete the skill. The original cracks continued to grow and finally reached the brink of collapse. It was already in irreparable damage. Helpless, Long Haochen could only use it for the final blow. Compared to Long Haochen's equipment, Huang Yi's equipment was much more luxurious. The earthen yellow light was the additional skill of his staff, Earth Elemental Shield. Chapter 35. As he landed, Long Haochen was panting. The lack of spiritual energy in his body made him feel weak. If it was a life-and-death battle, he would not hesitate to take the spirit recovery pill. But this was a competition, and he did not want to waste ammunition. He hoped to rely on the competition to stimulate his potential. Without much pause, he released the halo of faith, stomped the ground, and charged forward again. At this time, he was only about 20 meters away from Huang Yi. As long as he could close the distance in a short time, he had the confidence to win. However, at this moment, a faint smile appeared on Huang Yi's face. Pointing his wand forward, Long Haochen kept chanting an incantation. A ring of light instantly fell to the ground. That ring of light unexpectedly swam on the ground and appeared under Long Haochen's feet in a flash. Then, 10 spikes simultaneously protruded from the ground, forming a cage-like shape, trapping Long Haochen inside. The Earth Elemental Sprite's chant was also completed at this moment. Its coordination with Huang Yi could be said to be perfect. In midair, a ball of yellow suddenly appeared. Then, dozens of stones the size of millstones fell from the sky, smashing towards Long Haochen in the cage. If Long Haochen still had a shield, it would not be difficult for him to block the falling rocks. But he had lost the glorious shield. How could he defend himself with a shield? Taking a deep breath, Long Haochen's eyes instantly turned serious. When the spikes formed a cage that trapped him, he knew that it would be very difficult for him to win today's battle. But he would not give up until the last moment. He gripped the hilt of the fire sword with both hands, took half a step with his left leg, keeping his feet shoulder-width apart. Then he twisted his waist and flicked upwards. Determination and perseverance coexisted in his eyes as he stared at the falling rocks, completing the flicking motions one by one. At this time, Long Haochen's battle techniques and powerful spiritual energy were on full display. He did not use any spiritual energy, but purely relied on his physical strength to flick the falling rocks. The fire sword could always hit the weakest spot on the side of the rocks by a hair's breadth. He used the rock's force to flick it away instead of fighting it head-on. This was the best way to conserve spiritual energy. On the other side, Huang Yi and his Earth Elemental Spirit once again began a lengthy chant. This time, his chant took even longer than when he summoned the Earth Giant. What was even stranger was that both he and the Earth Elemental Sprite were chanting at a very slow pace. Every time he chanted a scale, the Earth Elemental Sprite would follow up with a scale. This was the essence of a mage's combined chant. It was a secret skill used to cast spells of a higher level, and it required a high level of cooperation between the spellcasters. Chanting together with an elemental spirit that was connected to one's mind was obviously the easiest way to achieve the effect of joint casting. The other 8 contestants in the 3 groups could see that the outcome was set. No matter what spell Huang Yi and his earth elemental sprite were chanting, Long Haochen had no chance of interrupting them. The longer the casting time, the more powerful the spell would be, not to mention using magic of a higher level. One after another, the falling stones were sent flying by Long Haochen. He was pleasantly surprised to find that his physical strength had indeed improved by leaps and bounds. Although continuously breaking the falling stones made his arms sore and numb, at least he was able to conserve his internal spiritual power. Boom! The golden red light shone brightly again. It was still the glorious sun slash. Long Haochen used 2 glorious sun slashes in a row to cut a hole in the cage of spikes in front of him and rushed out. It's too late. You can surrender now. Huang Yi's calm voice rang out. He had a confident smile on his face. His gaze was gentle, but there was a hint of inconspicuous pride in it. Long Haochen didn't charge at him again. He realized that the ground beneath his feet seemed to have changed. The originally yellow ground now had an additional layer of faint yellow light. Although the light wasn't strong, it was definitely there. Huang Yi smiled slightly. You don't believe me? Watch. He waved the staff in his hand lightly, and a strange scene appeared. The ground beneath his feet suddenly bulged, pushing his body up at least 3 meters. Immediately after, the bulging mound of earth actually brought his body back quickly, even faster than Long Haochen's charging speed. In an instant, the distance between him and Long Haochen had widened by 100 meters. Whether it was a warrior or a knight, the most important thing when facing magician was distance. With the distance suddenly widened, Long Haochen was also at a loss. Immediately after, he felt the ground beneath his feet shake violently. A huge mound of earth surged up in an instant, and with a violent shake, his body was instantly thrown into the air. Long Haochen hurriedly curled his body up in the air, and with a flip, he landed on the ground. However, another mound of earth rose up, crashing fiercely towards him. He waved his sword and slashed downwards. Bang! The great force once again threw Long Haochen into the air. What made him despair was that he could clearly see that the entire arena seemed to have come alive. Countless mounds of earth surged like waves, and Huang Yi just stood there quietly at a high vantage point in the distance, a smile on his face, and even a hint of mockery as he looked at him. Earth-type level 6 spell, Earth Wave. This was the most powerful self-defense spell for Earth magicians. Not only could it help them quickly shift their position, but it could also be used to block and attack the enemy. It was a powerful crowd control spell that combined both attack and defense. As long as one was still on the ground, it was almost impossible to escape the control of this spell, unless the opponent's strength was strong enough to shatter this spell. Before Long Haochen could even land on the ground, he was sent flying once again. He was like a small boat on the crest of a wave. Countless waves of earth came from all directions and continuously battered his body. No matter how tough Long Haochen's body was, he couldn't help but feel his blood boil. The referee stood in the distance, silently watching this scene. Right now, he was only waiting for Long Haochen to admit defeat. Looking at Long Haochen struggling on his wave of earth, Huang Yi couldn't help but feel a bit of admiration. This young knight was definitely younger than him, but his cultivation had already reached the 5th level. Moreover, his willpower was really strong. Unfortunately, he was still just a knight, and Link was best at controlling the entire arena. So what if it was a knight? This feeling of having everything under control was really wonderful. At this moment, suddenly, Long Haochen's body that had been thrown into the air stopped for a moment. Faintly, Huang Yi could only see a purple glow on Long Haochen's body. Immediately after, a fine purple light appeared out of thin air, and just like that, it actually forcibly supported his body, preventing him from falling any further. Roar! An angry roar resounded, and a shocking primordial aura instantly spread out from the purple light. It was shining with 9 rays of purple light, and in the air, it formed a magnificent magical rune. A huge body suddenly appeared under Long Houchin and caught his body. Haoyue! Long Houchin called out in surprise and laid on Haoyue's broad back. He violently panted. The feeling of his spiritual energy being almost depleted was not a good one. If he was thrown a few more times by the earth wave, he was afraid that he would really be injured. Yes, Haoyue had come. Sensing Long Houchin's crisis, it automatically teleported to his side. A dense green light appeared under Haoyue's body, supporting its body that was already more than 4 meters long. When it was with Long Houchin, its eyes were filled with warmth, coquettishness, and pleading for affection. But at this moment, the 6 eyes on Haoyue's 3 heads were filled with only coldness. Floating in the air, it coldly stared at Huang Yi in the distance. A mount? Finally willing to let out a mount. What kind of magical beast is this? Levitation? Huang Yi was also shocked to see Haoyue. 3-headed lizard? And it was so huge. This kind of magical beast did not seem to exist in his memory. But he recognized that wind-type levitation spell. He laughed coldly in his heart. Levitation is not a flying spell. With such a huge body, how long can it float in the air? As long as it falls, it will still be affected by my Earth Wave spell. My Earth Wave spell can still last for more than 10 minutes. Huang Yi was not careless. From a moment Haoyue appeared, he and his Earth Elemental Sprite had already started chanting incantations again. He was chanting Meteor, while the Earth Elemental Sprite was chanting Rockfall. The specialty of Meteor was its stronger attack power, but there was only one Meteor, and it could be controlled according to the magician's will. Combined with the area of effect Rockfall, the overall attack power naturally increased. There were 2 on his side chanting incantations, but there were 3 on Haoyue's side, and all 3 had different attributes. Low voices came from the mouths of Little Light, Little Fire, and Little Green at the same time. Even Long Houchin could not understand their chanting. Completely different from humans, their incantations were short and powerful. The first to complete the spell was Little Light. A golden ring of light appeared around its big head. Little Light raised its head and spat out a dazzling golden light into the air. Suddenly, a cloud of light appeared in the sky. Immediately, a golden pillar of light descended from the sky and landed on Long Houchin's body. A warm current spread through his body in an instant. Long Houchin felt as if the liquid spiritual energy in his body was boiling, rising and recovering at an astonishing speed. Dazzling heaven and earth, the Guardian Knight's 5th grade skill, also known as Spirit Replenishment. This skill had great limitations and was only useful between light ability users. It was a spell that transferred spiritual energy. Among the Knight's secret skills, it was even more rare than ready. Whether it was the Guardian Knight or the Punishment Knight, very few learned this skill. Who would be willing to transfer their spiritual energy to others for no reason? But Little Light knew this spell, and it was directly used on Long Houchin's body. Long Houchin felt as if his internal spiritual energy had recovered by more than half in an instant, and he immediately sat up straight on Haoyue's back. Because Huang Yi and the Earth Elemental Sprite were the first to cast their spells, Rockfall and Meteor were completed at the same time. In the sky, countless millstone-sized stones fell. At the same time, in the distance, a round stone shining with a yellow radiance whistled through the air, heading straight for Long Houchin. Long Houchin sat upright on Haoyue's back, unmoving. He and Haoyue were telepathically connected, and naturally knew what Haoyue's 3 heads were doing. The flaming sword in his hand pointed downwards, and a golden halo rose. Ready! Little Fire let out an angry roar towards the sky, and a fiery red hexagram flashed in front of its head. Its fiery red little eyes also lit up with a dazzling red light. Boom! A huge pillar of fire with Haoyue's body as its diameter suddenly soared into the sky, and all the falling stones were almost instantly turned to ashes. Even a meteor that was shooting towards it collided with it, and it was about the same weight. When it finally arrived in front of Long Houchin, Little Fire swung its big head and forcibly knocked away the meteor that no longer had much force of impact. Little Green's magic was completed at this moment, and a strong green light flashed behind it in a flash. A green hexagram instantly formed, and then a hurricane sprayed out from Hao Yue's back. Although it looked a little inelegant, as if it was putting something, but the effect was absolutely awesome. Hao Yue's huge body was pushed by this wind pillar spell, and like a meteor chasing the moon, it immediately flew straight towards Huang Yi. That's right, levitation couldn't fly, but with the help of wind pillar spell, it was still possible to break through the air and glide for a short period of time. Hao Yue's three heads cooperated with tacit understanding. Little Light restored Long Houchin's spiritual energy, Little Fire defended, and Little Green was responsible for flying. It sounded like a long time, but in fact it was all completed in a short period of time. A triple attribute magical beast? Huang Yi was a little stunned. His meteor spell had just been broken, and Hao Yue's body was already enlarging in his eyes. Not good. Huang Yi hurriedly controlled the Earth Wave spell to escape. Maintaining this Earth Wave spell also consumed spiritual energy. Moreover, in the series of battles with Long Houchin, his spiritual energy consumption was also quite large. At this moment, he was already unable to attack again. He only wanted to first increase the distance and wait for Long Houchin to land before doing anything else. But how could Long Houchin give him another chance? Long Houchin tapped on Hao Yue's back, and his whole body shot out like an arrow. Little Green spat out a small wind pillar and attacked under Long Houchin's feet, causing his speed to instantly reach the limit. The Earth Wave spell was indeed ingenious. Huang Yi hurriedly controlled the Earth Wave under his feet to change direction. A white light flashed, and a powerful pulling force pulled Huang Yi up amidst his cry of alarm. The next moment, Long Houchin's blazing fire sword arrived in front of him. Saint Spiritual Stove Draw. Previously, when Long Houchin was within 20 meters of him, he wanted to use this skill, but was blocked by the sudden spike prison cage. How could he give him another chance now? Hao Yue landed, and his thick and powerful four limbs suddenly kicked off, rushing in the direction where Long Houchin fell. Little Green opened its mouth, and a suction force pulled his body horizontally. Immediately afterward, it blew out a ball of wind, supporting Long Houchin to slowly land. When Huang Yi came to, three malevolent heads were already in front of him from three directions, breathing heavily. Little Fire even used its tongue to lick its mouth. It seemed to think he was very delicious. Don't. I admit defeat. Chapter 36. Don't. I admit defeat. Huang Yi cried out in alarm. The entire arena was shocked. This scene was too dramatic. No one could have imagined that Huang Yi, who had originally gained the upper hand, would be turned around by Long Houchin in such a short period of time. From Hao Yue's appearance to the end of the match, only 10 breaths of time had passed, but Hao Yue's strength was undoubtedly evident. Although it didn't use any powerful magic, its three heads and three attributes worked together extremely well. It was as if there were three magicians helping Long Houchin at the same time. The Earth Wave quietly disappeared, and the arena regained its calm. But Hao Yue made a move. Its three heads and 6 eyes all focused on the Earth Elemental Sprite on Huang Yi's shoulder. Greenie opened its mouth, and a powerful suction came from its mouth. The Earth Elemental Sprite let out a shriek and was sucked into its mouth in the next moment. No, Huang Yi cried out. His fear of Hao Yue's three heads instantly turned into despair. The Elemental Spiritual Stove was extremely important. Losing the Earth Elemental Sprite was equivalent to his overall strength dropping by 40%. Greenie, don't spit it out. Long Houchin shouted in a low voice. Greenie looked at Long Houchin with some confusion, while Light and Fire swallowed their saliva. There was a reluctant look in their eyes, but they still nudged Greenie in a very human way. Greenie reluctantly opened its mouth, and with a poof, the Earth Elemental Sprite smashed onto Huang Yi's body. Although this little thing was trembling from fright, and the elemental energy on its body was covered in saliva. He was still overjoyed. He didn't hesitate to absorb it into his body, and the saliva was transferred to his clothes on his chest. Long Houchin hit Greenie's head with his hand in exasperation. You guys really want to eat everything. Brother Huang, sorry. Huang, he shook his head. I should be the one thanking you. I lost. With that, he gratefully gave Long Houchin a magician's salute, and then turned to walk to the resting area. Long Houchin wins. Not to mention the other competitors. Even the referee who had announced the victory could not help but lean over to size up the rare magical beast beside Long Houchin. It wasn't that there weren't magical beasts with 3 attributes, but it was extremely rare to see one with 3 heads. Furthermore, magical beasts that could possess 3 different attributes were usually at least of the 8th rank. The judge was a discerning person. He could tell that Long Houchin's magical beast companion was only at the beginning of the 6th tier. His aura wasn't too strong. Moreover, it seemed like it was already an adult. If the lizard could continue to grow, it would definitely help Long Houchin become a powerful knight with its innate gift of 3 magic attributes. Long Houchin did not stay for long. He sent Haoyue back to his hotel room through the contract. Magical beasts could be teleported to by themselves. Especially since Long Houchin and Haoyue had a blood contract, they could even set up multiple teleportation points. Everything should be fine today, right? I ended the competition so quickly. I have to wait for Kai first. Long Houchin was filled with guilt for making Kai wait and worry for him twice in a row. Therefore, after winning the competition, he could not wait to leave the training field. Today's battle had also established his position in the 3rd group. Huang Yi was most likely his strongest opponent in the 3rd group. After winning this battle, the rest of the competition would be much easier. On the other side, in the training field for the 2nd group, Lin Xian sat in the resting area, watching the competition that was about to start worriedly. She was even more nervous than when she was competing in the competition herself. Both parties were walking towards the center of the field. One of them was the bald priest, Sima Xian, who had defeated Lin Xian the day before. On the other side, tuck, tuck, tuck. Amidst the familiar sound, Kai held her green bamboo staff and slowly walked into the training field. Sima Xian looked at Kai, who was slowly walking towards him and could not help but frown. Yesterday, he had also seen the battle between Kai and Lin Xian. Kai chose to admit defeat immediately. At that time, he was very curious. How could this blind lady pass the preliminary round? Today, Kai was his opponent. Sima Xian versus Kai. Match start. The referee announced and stepped back. For pillars that supported the assassins rose up as well. Sima Xian did not attack immediately. Instead, he looked at Kai and asked, Miss, are you sure you can do it? Why don't you admit defeat? I don't like to fight with you girls anyway. I can't do it if you're like this. I'm going to attack. Kai's cold voice sounded. In the next moment, Sima Xian suddenly felt goosebumps all over his body. His scalp felt like it was going to explode. A suffocating killing intent instantly filled the air. Kai was still Kai the blind lady with the green bamboo staff. But at this moment, in Sima Xian's eyes, she had become an incomparably sharp blade. Kai's figure flashed, like a black lightning that suddenly appeared in the training field. Sima Xian only saw a blur before Kai appeared in front of him. The short end of the green bamboo staff was directly used as a dagger to point at his chest. Sima Xian's reaction was still very fast. When he saw a blur in front of him, he felt that something was wrong. His body quickly took a big step back, and at the same time he relied on his intuition to erect his thick staff in front of him. Dang! Sima Xian only felt a strong force surging in an instant. There was also a dense chill that drilled into his palm through the staff. The strong, penetrating force made his whole body cold. In the eyes of the other spectators, they only saw Kai rushing forward like a ghost. The green bamboo staff touched Sima Xian's staff, and Sima Xian's body had already slid backward. Fifth order, Sima Xian screamed his heart. Without a fifth order cultivation, how could her spiritual power be so strong? I can't let her get close to me. Sima Xian reacted correctly in the first moment. He stomped his right foot on the ground, and the holy light exploded. The white light turned into a circle of light and blasted towards the surroundings. Sure enough, his reaction was correct. Kai who was like a maggot in a tarsal bone, paused slightly under the holy light explosion. Sima Xian waved the staff in his hand, and the hammer of holy light was instantly cast, smashing directly at Kai Er's head. At the same time, a strong golden light rose from his body. It was the holy light of the priest's protection. Roar! Sima Xian roared angrily. His body suddenly swelled, and the clothes on his upper body were torn apart. He instantly entered the state of berserk. If it was said that in the previous battle, his and Lin Xian's exchange of offense and defense was already shocking, then at this time, he actually used berserk, which made the other contestants' hearts twitch. This guy, is he really a priest? Sima Xian's response was not bad. Unfortunately, he was facing Kai Er. Kai Er's body swayed slightly. She pointed her green bamboo staff forward, and the hammer of holy light disappeared into thin air. It did not display its attack power at all. At the same time, Kai Er's body also became illusory. Sima Xian could not capture her figure at all. In the state of berserk, Sima Xian's attack frequency and strength were astonishing. He waved the staff in his hand rapidly and attacked Kai. However, a shocking scene appeared. In the face of such a tyrannical attack, Kai did not retreat. Instead, she actually rushed into the shadow of Sima Xian's staff. Poof, 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 poof. There were 4 consecutive sounds. 4 beams of green light hit the 4 positions of the holy light at the same time, and the holy light instantly collapsed. At this moment, Sima Xian felt a chill in his heart. Is she really a human and not a ghost? It clearly looked like it had hit her, but it did not feel like it had touched a physical body. At this moment, an ear-piercing scream sounded close to him. Sima Xian only felt pain in his ears, and his mind was momentarily in a trance. It was also at this moment that Kai who was already 2 meters away from him, pointed the green bamboo staff in her hand forward again. A faint green halo shone, and with a poof, it hit the tip of his staff. An unknown amount of power surged forth. Even though he was in the state of berserk, he was still in a trance. The iron palm rolled back and directly hit Sima Xian's thick chest muscles. Immediately after, the green bamboo staff in Kai Er's hand swept horizontally. With a poof, Sima Xian was sent flying 5 meters away and landed on the ground. A black shadow flashed, and the long end of the green bamboo staff was already on Sima Xian's throat. Crafty thrust, ghost flash, demonic toon brain, overlord stab. The 4 assassin skills were executed as smoothly as flowing water. And in the state of berserk, Sima Xian did not have the slightest bit of resistance. Kai Er's spiritual power was full of penetrating power. At this moment, Sima Xian, who was on the ground, could only use his own spiritual power to desperately neutralize Kai Er's spiritual power. There was no way he could resist. You've lost, Kai said lightly, and kept the green bamboo staff, slowly walking to the resting area. She did not even wait for the referee's confirmation. This was absolute confidence. In yesterday's competition, the other contestants who looked down on Kai because she admitted defeat to Lin Xian immediately all had strange expressions on their faces. Although Sima Xian did not have the cultivation of rank 5, he was already above rank 4 level 8. In the state of berserk, he could also fight against a rank 5 expert. However, in front of Kai he did not have the slightest chance. From the time Kai appeared until the end of the competition, the time was too short. But Kai Er's powerful attack, which was as quiet as a virgin and as swift as a thunderbolt, shook the hearts of everyone present. One must know that from the beginning to the end, she did not rely on those pillars, and she was also a blind person. She really deserved the title of the #1 assassin. Kai wins. At the same time as the referee announced, Sima Xian got up from the ground and touched his bald head. When he looked at Kai again, his gaze had changed a little, and he muttered, "So an assassin can be so strong." This battle had a great impact on Sima Xian, because this was the first time he did not have the ability to fight back against an opponent of the same age. In fact, the current Sima was a bit like a light attribute berserker. The attack skills of a priest in the early stage were too limited. Although his physical strength was strong, how could he be compared to the super genius reincarnation saint from the Assassin Temple? Lin Xen stared blankly at Kai, as she returned to the rest area, his eyes staring blankly. What he wanted to say to Kai, the most right now, was to hug her thigh. Of course, he didn't have any other thoughts. He just wanted to hug her thigh. Never in his wildest dreams would he have imagined that this little girl, who looked so delicate and had lost her sight when she was with Long Haochen, was actually so terrifyingly powerful. He had just experienced Sima Xian's combat strength yesterday. Too strong, simply too strong. Such a strong person, who in this year's Monster Hunters preliminaries could compete with her. Lin Xian's shock was no less than Lin Xian's. Lin Xian had not thought of it. She had not thought of it either. Moreover, in a match with her yesterday, Kai had deliberately admitted defeat. Even if she had Rose, could she win against her? Brother, where did you find a little girl as perverted as you? In the past, Lin Xian had always thought that Long Haochen was the most talented person in the world, but this girl in front of her was probably not even as old as Long Haochen. Her cultivation had also reached the 5th rank. Looking at the way she dealt with Sima Xian with ease, it was obvious that she had not used her full strength. If she could really become her brother's little girlfriend, it would definitely be a great thing. Sister, I'll leave first. Kai came to Lin Xian's side and said softly. Lin Xian smiled and said, Are you going to wait for him? Yes. Go quickly. You are so strong. I don't have to worry about your safety. Lin Xian smiled. Tuck, tuck, tuck. Under everyone's gaze, Kai quietly left. In the next few days of the competition, Long Haochen could be said to have a smooth sailing in the 3rd group. He did not encounter any trouble. He did not even need Hao Yue to fight. He had won 5 times in a row. The 2 priests had directly admitted defeat when they faced him. They had seen very clearly when Long Haochen strangled the Earth Giant. How could they withstand that level of attack power? The other 3 victories were all contributed by the assassins. Everyone had 9 matches in the group stage, and Long Haochen had won 7 so far, basically guaranteeing his qualification to advance. In the last 2 days of the group stage, he would face 2 strange girls, Wang Yuan and Chunning. In this group, Long Haochen and Huang Yi had displayed great strength, but the one who attracted the most attention was not them, but the summoner girl, Chunning. After losing 3 times in a row, she won 3 times in a row. Her fighting style was very simple, which was to summon the Living Soul Gate. Just as Long Haochen had predicted, this girl had no way of knowing what she could summon. In the battle against Huang Yi from her Living Soul Gate, an advanced level 8 green dragon brazenly drilled out, frightening Huang Yi so much that he directly admitted defeat. From then on, this girl directly rose to become the most uncertain factor in the 3rd group. Who among these youths could contend against a level 8 magical beast? Wang Yuan's performance was also very eye-catching. She unexpectedly obtained 7 victories like Long Haochen, but so far, she had not yet encountered the strongest Long Haochen and Huang Yi. The last 2 rounds were against them. Therefore, Long Haochen had basically locked in one of the qualifying spots, and the other spot would be contested between Wang Yuan and Huang Yi. Based on the current performance, although Huang Yi was behind by 2 rounds, the possibility of him catching up to Wang Yuan's 7 victories was still very high. Moreover, as long as he defeated Wang Yuan, based on the outcome of the battle, he would be able to surpass his opponent and advance together with Long Haochen. In the 3rd group, there was a strange random summoner. In the 2nd group, there was an even more strange one, and that was Lin Xian. After 7 rounds, Lin Xian lost 1 and drew 6. That's right. Other than losing against the bald priest, Sima Xian, due to a time problem, he had drawn with his opponents in the next 6 rounds. This was because, although he did not know how to attack, no one could break his defense. Even Lin Xian, who had the Rose Unicorn, was the same. Unfortunately, the 8th day of the competition was about to begin, and his opponent today was Kair. Kair outshone the others in the second group, winning 6 out of 7 battles and losing 1. Lin Xin also relied on the strength of the Rose Unicorn to obtain 5 wins, 1 draw, and 1 loss. The one she lost was to the summoner from the Soul Temple. However, the next day, when the summoner faced Kair, he was seriously injured by Kair, causing him to lose several matches in a row. Because of this, the Soul Temple even protested to the Assassin Temple. However, was it of any use? The bald priest, Sima Xian, became the third in this group, winning 5 out of 7 battles and losing 2. The other was lost to Lin Xin. The advantage of the Rose Unicorn was indeed too great. In addition, Lin Xin was a punishment knight, and after many battles with the evolved Rose Unicorn, their coordination was getting better and better. In the last 2 rounds of this group, Kair would face Lin Xin, a magician who did not know how to attack, and a warrior. Basically, she would team up with Lin Xin to advance to the next round. Lin Xin knew very well that if it were not for Kair, she might not have been able to advance to the next round. She liked this little girl, who helped her family but not reason, more and more. In the past 5 days, Long Haochen did not cause any trouble. He traveled with Kair every day. After all, they were still too young. To them, holding hands and traveling together for a while was already a very happy thing. They did not talk much between them, but they were familiar with each other's aura. Lin Xin did not tell Long Haochen about the strength of Kair. This was a matter between a young couple, and she would let him discover it himself. Long Haochen also did not ask, because Kair admitted defeat to Lin Xin on the first day of the competition. Long Haochen first thought that Kair's blindness caused her to be unable to fight, and he felt even more pity for her. On the 8th day of the group competition, early morning, while eating breakfast, Lin Xin teased Long Haochen, "Little brother, you send Kair back every day. Where did you take her play?" Yihua, who was also eating, also looked towards Long Haochen. Lin Xin naturally would not hide the fact that Long Haochen knew Kair. She also told him about the situation of Kair's strength. Yihua naturally would not object to his precious disciple knowing this future star of the Assassin Temple. A blind girl was actually so strong. This in itself was an anomaly. What's more, Yihua's innately weak internal spiritual energy caused him to naturally sympathize with Kair, as they were in the same boat. Although he did not think that it was a good thing for Long Haochen to find a girlfriend so early, something that happened yesterday made him change his mind. "Play. I'm sending her back," Long Haochen said. Lin Xin immediately widened her eyes. "No way, little brother. Is this how you date girls? This is too unromantic. Even if you can't take her to play because of the competition schedule, you should at least treat her to a meal or something. Communicate more and get familiar with her family situation or something. Treat her to a meal." Long Haochen was dazed. "But I don't have money." He really didn't have money. That bit of money he had was all used to fill Hao Yue's stomach. After Hao Yue evolved, his appetite became bigger. He really broke a gold coin in half to spend it. Lin Xin slapped her forehead and said with a speechless expression, "You silly little brother, if you don't have money, why don't you ask your big sister? So stupid. Here." As she spoke, she took out a bag of gold coins and threw it to Long Haochen. "Big sister, I can't take your money." Long Haochen hurriedly wanted to return the bag of gold coins. Lin Xin glared at him. "What? Are you looking for a beating? Quickly keep it. Isn't it right for a little brother to spend his big sister's money? I have always treated you as my own little brother. Don't you see me as your real big sister? If you dare to return it, big sister will get angry and ignore you in the future." Long Haochen suddenly didn't know what to say. Yihua said, "Just keep it. Xin Air is doing this for your own good. That Miss Kai, you have to treat her a bit better. If possible, when the finals are over and the monster hunters choose their members, try to be in the same group as her." Just yesterday, a certain mysterious old man found Yihua and had a secret talk with him for more than 2 hours. After the old man left, Yihua was immersed in the feeling of not knowing whether to laugh or cry for a long time. because this important person from Knights Templars came to find him and actually told him to try to matchmake Long Houchin and Kai Er as much as possible. Although he didn't say it explicitly, his meaning was expressed. That is, Kai Er has an extraordinary significance to the Assassin Temple. If Long Houchin could really be together with her, it would be very beneficial to the friendship between Knights Templars and the Assassin Temple. The two of them could also help each other. However, with Yihua's personality, he naturally wouldn't really be a matchmaker for his disciple. Today, he mentioned this to subtly express that he doesn't oppose Long Houchin and Kai Er being together. After keeping the gold coins, Long Houchin suddenly felt a bit more ashamed. That's right. I've known Kai Er for so long, but I haven't even treated her to a meal before. Magic Trial Field, the second group's competition venue. According to the draw, the first person to fight in the second group today is Kai Er, and her opponent is impressively Lin Xin. Kai Er versus Lin Xin, both parties enter the arena. The referee loudly shouted in the trial field. Kai Er slowly stood up. Just as she was about to walk out, Lin Xin already stood up and shouted, "I admit defeat. I admit defeat." This is the first time since the start of the second group that someone admitted defeat before even entering the arena. Lin Xin smiled at Kai Er. Although he knew that Kai Er couldn't see it, he still waved his hand. To him, no matter what, he won't be able to enter the top 16. Since that's the case, he might as well be a good person. Give Kai Er a favor. Not to mention, he doesn't think that he can block Kai Er's attack. Although Lin Xin doesn't know offensive magic, it doesn't mean that he isn't smart. On the contrary, he is an extremely smart person. What is Kai Er's profession? She is an assassin. Does an assassin use a green bamboo cane as a weapon? Definitely not. From the start of the competition until now, Kai Er has never used her real assassin's weapon. If she really uses it, who knows how strong her attack power will be. He doesn't want to be the first test subject just because his defense is strong enough. In the third group, Long Houchin is also the first to fight today. However, he doesn't have it as easy as Kai Er. Wang Yuanyuan stood opposite Long Houchin, her right hand holding the heavy shield that is many times larger than her body. She looked at Long Houchin with eyes full of excitement. She knows that if she can win this round, the first place in the second group will be hers. Although the top 16 will have to draw lots for the finals, the first place in the group will only meet the second place in the other groups. Being the first place is obviously very advantageous for her. However, she also knows that this guy in front of her is not easy to deal with. Although the mount that Long Houchin released when he defeated Huang, it was just a flash in the pan. It left a very deep impression on her. Match start. The referee announced and slowly retreated. Wang Yuanyuan held the shield in front of her and shouted at Long Houchin, "Summon it. Get that mount of yours out." Long Houchin shook his head and said, "That's not fair. If you're really stronger than me, I will consider it." Although he hopes to increase his combat experience through this competition, he will not be inflexible. Long Houchin didn't expect his cultivation to break through to rank 5 in the competition. Now, not only did he break through, but Haoyue also completed his second evolution. This really gives him the strength to fight for the top 3 in the finals. That is the reward of a spiritual stove. Moreover, he has not fulfilled his promise to Lin Xin. It would be best if he can complete it in this Monster Hunters competition. Long Houchin doesn't like the feeling of being indebted to others. Hearing his words, Wang Yuanyuan couldn't help but be slightly startled. She slowly put away the gemstone in her left hand and nodded to Long Houchin, saying, "If that's the case, then let's have a fair fight." As she spoke, she let out a roar and instantly rushed towards Long Houchin. Her speed was not comparable to an assassin's, but with every step she took, there would be a bang. Her own aura would also soar. Silver's spiritual power rose, covering the surface of her skin with a layer of silver light. Rank 5? Liquid spiritual energy. Long Houchin's heart skipped a beat. In the previous competitions, Wang Yuanyuan only showed the peak of rank 4 cultivation. This is the first time she showed the strength of a rank 5. He didn't know if she hid her strength before or if she just had a breakthrough. Just as a powerful person in the Warrior Temple commented, Wang Yuan is not a traditional shield warrior. Her huge shield is completely used as a heavy axe. When she was less than 10 meters away from Long Haochen, she stomped her left foot on the ground and jumped into the air. She raised the huge shield and went straight for Long Haochen's head. That ferocious look is not the slightest bit like a girl. She is even more ferocious than a male warrior. Long Haochen held a fine iron shield in his left hand and a fire sword in his right hand. The fine iron shield is cheap. After losing the brilliant shield, he also went to the Sanctuary Alliance auction house to take a look. However, first of all, his own gold coins have to feed Hao Yue in the future. Secondly, good weapons are too expensive. They're so expensive that he came back after a few glances. A shield of ordinary magic equipment cost thousands of gold coins. Even an alloy shield costs more than 100 gold coins. With no other choice, Long Haochen could only spend 10 gold coins to buy the fine iron shield in his hand and use it for now. He also spent 20 gold coins to buy a heavy sword, which he kept in the forget-me-not ring as a backup. Now, he just wanted to wait until the end of the finals to quickly go to the Knights Templars to collect the prize for the preliminary round. It seems that the top 10 will get a piece of magic equipment. If I sell this thing, it should be enough to get me a set of magic equipment. Really, a hero is stumped by 1 gold coin. Long Haochen is proud. He will definitely not ask his sister and teacher for money to spend. Assault. Facing Wang Yuan, who jumped into the air and slashed at him, Long Haochen used the assault skill. Of course, he did not rush at Wang Yuan, but to the side. With a sudden increase in speed, he dodged Wang Yuan's attack. Boom! The huge shield slammed into the ground, and the silver spiritual power instantly spread, creating a distorted shock wave. Nearly half of the shield in Wang Yuan's hand was submerged into the ground. The power of this attack was comparable to the light slash sword that Long Haochen used, the Holy Sword. Although Long Haochen dodged Wang Yuan's attack, the silver spiritual power still affected him to a certain extent, so he could not attack immediately after his assault skill was interrupted. Wang Yuan's face did not change when her attack missed. She suddenly swung the shield in Long Haochen's direction. Suddenly, a large piece of yellow soil turned into thousands of flying sand straight at Long Haochen. Wang Yuan shook her wrist, and the huge shield flew out, straight at Long Haochen. The sound of the heavy shield breaking through the air was as shocking as the sigh of the god of death. Long Haochen's upper body fell backwards, as if his waist had been broken. Wang Yuan's giant shield whizzed past his head in an instant with a whistling sound. At this moment, Long Haochen's right foot touched the ground, and he counterattacked. At this time, Wang Yuan's shield was not in her hand, so it was the best time to attack her. The shield blocked the attack, and Long Haochen's fine iron shield went straight at Wang Yuan. At this time, Wang Yuan's huge shield would need at least a breath's time to turn around. Oomph! Wang Yuan snorted coldly, and with a flash of silver light, she unexpectedly rushed at Long Haochen without hesitation. What surprised Long Haochen was that in the next instant, the huge shield had already appeared in her hand without warning. The situation had turned into a situation where both sides collided with each other. Bang! Long Haochen flew 5 meters away, and under the huge impact, the fine iron shield in his hand had already broken into pieces. He was really at a disadvantage in terms of equipment. Also, Long Haochen was shocked to find that even with his external spiritual energy enhanced by Hao Yue's bloodline, he could not gain any advantage against Wang Yuan. In fact, he was even at a disadvantage. This girl is so strong. Because he had a date with Kaier every day, Long Haochen did not carefully observe Wang Yuan's battle situation. At this time, he finally understood that this girl was able to win 7 battles because of her real ability. That silver spiritual energy, could it be a rare spatial attribute? In an instant, Long Haochen came to a realization. If it was not a spatial attribute, how could the huge shield suddenly return her hand? After pushing back Long Haochen, Wang Yuan was also stunned. Their internal spiritual energy was about the same. When the same skills collided with each other, it was a competition of external spiritual energy and equipment. Without a doubt, Long Haochen's fine iron shield was at an absolute disadvantage. However, at the moment of the collision, Wang Yuanyuan felt that Long Haochen was like a lion that had suddenly erupted. His explosive power was so fierce that she was pushed back half a step, unable to connect her skills. If he had the same equipment as her, even if he could not win, he would not be sent flying, right? Although this was what she thought, her hands did not stop. He rushed toward Long Haochen, who was unsteady. The shield in her hand shook, and 3 rays of light appeared, covering Long Haochen's body. Although Long Haochen only had a single sword in his hand, the light in his eyes suddenly became sharp. After the previous test, he had some understanding of Wang Yuanyuan. At this time, he no longer held back. With a sudden thrust, the fire sword flashed with a dazzling light, and with a poof, it stabbed the edge of Wang Yuanyuan's heavy shield. At the same time, he muttered an incantation, holding the sword with both hands, and after the sudden thrust, he immediately used a glorious sun slash. Boom! The glorious sun slash accurately caught the real one of the 3 shield shadows, and there was a violent collision. This time, it was Wang Yuanyuan who was at a disadvantage. Both of their internal spiritual energy levels were about the same, but her attack just now had dispersed the power. However, the quality of her giant shield was clearly higher than a fire sword, and she was only pushed back a step. However, this blow also sounded the horn of Long Haochen's counterattack. He raised his left hand, and the fine iron heavy sword that he had bought appeared in his grasp. At the same time, he finished chanting the incantation. A light about a meter tall quietly floated behind him, its wings spread out, impressively in the shape of a radiant angel. A circle of golden light scattered from the angel's body, landing on Long Haochen's body. In an instant, his entire body was dyed with a layer of gold. Rank 5 Guardian Knight skill, Angel's Blessing. This skill was taught to Long Haochen by Yi Hua in the past few days after his cultivation broke through to the rank 5 Guardian. Angel's Blessing was not a secret skill, and all Guardian Knight had to learn it. This skill was extremely useful in a real battle, because it was an area of effect skill, and not only could it buff the user, but it could also buff the teammates. Under the situation where spiritual energy was continuously consumed, all attacks and defense would be imbued with the light attribute, and it would not affect the original attributes. Although the light attribute buff was far from the Holy Sword, it was superior in terms of endurance and area of effect. This was one of the essential skills for the Guardian Knight to lead the team to fight against the demons. The fire sword and fine iron heavy sword in Long Haochen's hands were both covered with a thick golden light. Apart from increasing his own attack power, using Angel's Blessing was more important for him to protect his weapons. If the fire sword was damaged again, how would he be able to participate in the later matches? With the buff from Angel's Blessing, the fine iron heavy sword could barely be considered as a magic weapon. Pure white blade, lightning stab. The heavy swords in both hands burst forth at the same time, and dozens of sword flashes pierced towards Wang Yuanyuan with incomparable sharpness. Wang Yuanyuan didn't expect Long Haochen to switch to 2 swords after his shield was damaged. Unprepared, she could only take a step back and put the giant shield in front of her, completely blocking her body.